The hero was asked if he knew that they charged 8 gold pieces for medicinal herbs, and if it was robbery. The hero was walking through the forest. There were insects sitting on the trees. He continued on his way. He said it was still so cold when suddenly he saw grass and picked it up. He was surprised to find it. The boy walked with the grass in his hands, rubbing his hands to keep them warm. When he looked at how much herb he had gathered, he said it was about 2 coppers, and he wished he had more. The hero thought about the fact that he was 6 years old at the time. He only remembered playing games. He said that he had to gather some more grass. He thought about how he was now like a character from RPG games himself. 6 years ago, when he opened his eyes, there was an incomprehensible ceiling in front of him. He was surprised. He didn't realize what this place was, what time it was, and he thought he was late. The hero thought that perhaps this was the sad fate of all office workers, but the first thing he thought of was the company. He then realized that his body wasn't moving, and he didn't realize what it was. He realized that he also could not speak. Reaching forward, he saw that it was the hand of an infant. The hero could not believe that it was his hand. He saw that it was like a baby's and didn't realize what was wrong with him. He could not understand what was happening and went into a panic. People were discussing that the baby hardly cried this time, that he was so calm. A man took the hero in his arms and said he wanted to look at his face. The man did not understand a word he said and thought about the fact that this man did not look modern and moreover was not Japanese. He thought about that. However, when the man took his hands in his hands, it became clear to him that the man was his father. The hero realized that he was reborn in another world. He was a 30-year-old lonely laborer who had been given a new life and a new name, namely the Aristocrat Senver. Now, the boy walked through the woods and wondered what kind of aristocracy it was where a 6-year-old child was forced to work. He said that the side branch of the family was still poor, and the life of luxury was still only a dream. The hero thought that even his father, Ryan Leewayer, was moonlighting extra. He exhaled. Arid thought about his father making paper umbrellas, and that rebirth was not an easy endeavor. He thought about the fact that there were things he had learned in 6 years of living in this world, and he always wondered why the characters in reincarnation novels didn't want to go back to the past world. He thought that, however, it was obvious that newborns just couldn't understand it, and it was worth starting with the fact that living in another world was itself an asterisk task. The hero thought that he himself was often on the verge of losing, such as when he wanted normal food as an infant. He thought that it took him years to become an ordinary person in the new world. And now he realized that here was no sudden urgency to go to work. Arid thought about the fact that here he didn't have to work extra hours that he wouldn't even get paid for later. And it was hard to believe that he could come home from work and the sun hadn't set yet. He wondered if this was what a quiet life after retirement looked like. He walked down the path and said how peaceful it was here. Behind the bushes he noticed something. The boy asked what that rumbling noise was. Suddenly he saw a bear yelling loudly. The men were fighting against it. One of them stood in front of the bear with a weapon in his hand and then jumped toward the beast, but the impact hit the ground. The second man held a staff. The first man jumped over the bear and shouted that we must act now. The second man used his staff to use a fireball. The beast caught fire. It was defeated. The hero looked at it mesmerized. He said it was the first time he had seen magic, and that it was cool. The first man cheerfully said that it worked, and that it was all the magic of the second man, that he would like the same. The one replied that it was all due to luck. The first man said he would hope for next year. They discussed going back to the guild, and that they would get drunk tonight. Arid looked on in surprise and thought about magic. He thought to himself that not everyone in this world could use magic, and to know how to use it, one must have divine revelation. He thought that divine revelation was a kind of ceremony on each birthday where one should thank God for one's birth, and if one was lucky, magic might awaken. The hero thought about the fact that in general, it is magic that can fall out once a year, a kind of gacha in reality. Besides, it can't be bought, and it often happens that it can't be knocked out in a lifetime. Arid hadn't led for the 6th year in a row. He looked in surprise at the place where the bear had been. A glowing orb had appeared there. He walked closer, not realizing what it was. The hero stretched out his hands toward the ball. When he took the ball in his hands, it disappeared. He asked what it was. The hero tried to squeeze his hand and thought about how everything disappeared as soon as he touched. He thought about what was beautiful. Later, the boy went back to town. He said he was home. His mom congratulated him on his return. She said he must have been tired. She asked if her son was bruised anywhere. Arid replied that he was fine, and he had earned 4 coppers today. They looked at the door in surprise. A visibly drunk guy came into the house and said he was back. Mom asked Robin if he had been drinking. He said yes and replied that Kevin had invited him to Caraft Street. He asked if she knew about Kevin being in charge there. The woman replied that that was the case. The guy said that having those connections is actually helpful. His mom told him to keep it that way. Robin agreed and said he had already eaten, so he might not be expected for dinner. Holding his hand to his head, he walked away. Arid sighed. His mother turned to him. She told him not to sigh so that Robin was the eldest son and therefore the next head of the family, that it was important for him to have such introductions. The boy agreed and cheerfully replied that he understood. The hero thought about how inheritance is important to aristocrats, and even to poor families like them. He thought about the fact that moreover, because of poverty, all family resources would be concentrated in one eldest son. And in short, the eldest son is raised by the whole family, from his parents to the youngest. He thought that there was nothing to be done about it, that it was the order of the day here, so he would not go against it. Arid decided that he wouldn't let it go either. He thought that in this world everything comes back to a person boomerangs, that he would leave home on his own, even with 4 copper. 6-year-old Arad Senver was determined. After that, he spent his days rummaging among the forest and home, gathering medicinal herbs in the forest, which is as good as a garden. He exchanged herbs for coins every day. Sometimes, in the depths of the forest, he watched others. The hero noticed hunters who were sent there by the guild. They hunted with magic. Once in a while, the same light would appear next to the mage. The hunters discussed that they thought they were going to die, that it was close. As they left, a glowing orb was left behind them. Arid began to call it a trace of magical power. He looked at the ball and pondered the fact that there was no source of light, and yet it still glowed. The hero reached out his hand to it and thought it was a mysterious light that disappeared at his touch. Several months passed. That day suddenly came. Arad, looking at the house, cried out how big it was. His mother asked if it was the first time he was seeing the main house. His father asked him to tone down his admiration and not to embarrass him. The hero with his parents and brother came to the main house. People were discussing that this year it was bigger than usual. Arid saw a huge queue and was surprised that it was to say hello to a 10-year-old child. They said it was, after all, a celebration of the 10th birthday of the head of the family's eldest son. The table was richly set. The boy ate and thought about how these are the kind of celebrations that happen about the nobility, how posh it was. He thought about how delicious it was that he couldn't believe he was eating such deliciousness in this world and that the meat was the best. He thought about how you can't find such flavors at home, and this was something he missed. His father turned to him. He told Arid not to be such a glutton and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. The father told his sons to come up. The boy was puzzled. The 3 of them knelt before the man on the throne. Ryan said they were honored to see my lord. The man asked if it was Ver. Arid realized that this was the head of the entire large family of aristocrats. The boy's father replied in the affirmative and thanked the head for inviting them this year. He pointed to Robin and said that this was his eldest son. The boy fearfully agreed. He said his name was Robin Livear. The hero was worried about his brother's snaggy wording. The head told Robin to be more diligent so as not to tarnish the family name. The man replied that it was fine. His father asked him if it was not good. The one agreed and said that he had received instruction from the head of the family himself. The boy's mother said that it was not for nothing that they had come here. Arid thought about the fact that he had not even been introduced. He didn't understand why his brother was happy about such a formulaic phrase. He turned around and looked back. He looked at the head of the family and thought he could understand why Robin was shaking so much, for the head looked intimidating. People gathered in the square. Fireworks were set off. All the people looked at it joyfully. The hero was surprised by the magical fireworks. Suddenly, several people came out to everyone. An appeal was made to the ladies and gentlemen. They were invited to look at the best magicians of the family and follow the amazing imitation battle. The hero watched the mages mesmerized. People were discussing that a battle of mages wasn't something you could see every day. Someone asked if Master Irma was there. They said that even a famous mage like her was the greatest aristocrat to date. That one used her staff. She stretched it forward and used a fireball. Fire appeared. Another girl, with a magic book in her hands, created a wave that extinguished the fire. Other magicians used their abilities too. It was a mesmerizing sight. All the people were watching. Robin asked Arad, to which he stared, adding that there was a battle. The boy pointed his finger at the glowing orbs and said that he was looking at those marks from magic, that after using magic there were such glowing things left behind. He didn't know why he was even saying that. The older brother asked what glowing meant and what he was talking about. The boy was puzzled. He said there's a light over there. Robin asked again where. The hero pointed again. The older brother replied that there was nothing glowing there. The younger wanted to show again, but Robin said there was nothing there. He asked if younger brother had slept badly and asked him to cut the crap. He said they were at a celebration at the Lord's house, so asked him to behave normally and not embarrass him. Arad was very surprised that they were out of sight. Arad turned to the maid and asked if he could distract her for a moment. The maid agreed and asked what was. The boy asked if she could see that there was something here. The girl was puzzled and did not see anything. She apologized and said she didn't know what he meant. She asked him to excuse her. He replied that he understood and apologized. The hero thought about it while looking at the glowing ball of light. He realized that it was a trace of magic. He thought about the fact that although there are plenty of them here, no one pays attention to them. Arad realized that he was the only one seeing them. Something distracted him from his musings. He saw a girl and asked who she was. He was told that she was the daughter of the Louis family, who were on good terms with Sir Burton. The Lord addressed her, calling her area and asked her to show them all. Ta agreed. The magicians finished the performance and rested. The aristocrats watched what was about to happen. The hero looked on in surprise. Arya stepped forward and began to cast a spell. She reached up and summoned a fireball that flew high into the sky. The girl bowed. The hero thought to himself. Everyone cheered. The head of the family and his cronies were pleased and laughed. Arad thought that in addition to being born an aristocrat, the girl also had magic, that she had won 2 lotteries at once. Suddenly he saw another luminous ball in the sky. The boy reached his hands up and picked it up. The balloon did not disappear. He heard that the fragment of the fireball had reached its peak, that the mastery had passed. Arad was shocked. He didn't realize what it was now. He thought at first that he had heard it, but then realized that he had not. He recalled hearing that the fireball fragment had reached its peak, that the mastery had passed. He stood looking at his hand, not understanding anything. Looking to the side, the hero saw a tree. He went in its direction and stretched his hand forward. People paid attention to him. He strained all his strength, supporting his arm with his other hand. There was a powerful blow on the tree. People were discussing that the tree had come down suddenly, that it was a lightning strike, that it had not come down but rather had been ripped out. Someone said that it was not lightning, that it was magic. Everyone was surprised and asked who did it. One guy said it was that boy that launched the fireball, pointing to Arad. The latter looked at his hands in surprise. The hero smiled contentedly. The hero was in shock. He thought how cool it was, that he had goosebumps, that he didn't know what it was. Maybe it was an endorphin or dopamine surge, but it was like everything in his brain was stirring. He marveled and thought it was the feeling after using magic. Arad rejoiced that such a thing could only be experienced in this world. He thought about being so exhilarated for the first time in the 6 years since his rebirth. The hero thought that it was dangerous to shoot around. Suddenly his hand began to rise. It was as if he was being controlled by magic. A new attack flew into the sky. He thought that controlling magic was difficult, and wasn't that how others did it? People around him began to discuss in amazement that magic at such an age, and yet he had used it twice in such a short time. The boy wondered what twice meant. He didn't feel very good and realized that it was called mana. The hero thought about the fact that magic is used according to mana, and if mana is scarce, according to the feeling it is like anemia. Arad felt dizzy. He thought about the fact that he used to play as mages in RPG games, and often squeezed all the juice out of them, and what was. Someone said that for such a young boy, he had a lot of magical power. It was said that he was related to an earl, so that was in order, and it was as expected from someone with blue blood flowing in him. Everyone was cheering him up. One of the mages said that this was it, faith in lineage. Another said that all ordinary people like to believe that there is a special reason for everything special, that it has nothing to do with it, and they are stupid. Irma said that, and yet it was true that this kid was amazing, that if the kid let off fireballs with that much force he would be down for 3 days. The crowd cheered. The hero thought about how he had never been flattered like this before, not even before his rebirth. Someone said he could use magic too. The boy turned around in surprise. He saw Aria standing in front of him. The girl said she was Aria Grace Lewis and asked what his name was. After hesitating, he said that his name was Arad Saint Ver. The girl replied that meant he was Arad, and it was the first time she had seen a 1-year-old who had the same magic as her. She held out her hand to him and asked if they would be friends. The hero held out his hand in response and said yes. He thought about the fact that he seemed to be holding the girl's hand for the first time in this world. Suddenly, she came closer. 21. Aria said quietly that there was no way she would lose to him. She distanced herself and smiled sweetly. Arad was surprised. The head of the family approached the boy and told him that he was Faith's son. Toth agreed. The count asked why he had not told him at their last meeting that he possessed magic. The hero thought of the fact that so-and-so at that time he did not yet know how to use it, and no one but he had seen fragments of magic. He replied that it was not as if Earl Burton had asked him. Toth hesitated. The boy thought that averting his gaze was apparently impolite, and he should have learned the etiquette of aristocracy properly from Ryan. The count laughed and said that Arad was funny. The latter was puzzled. The count said that the boy continued to look him in the eye without being frightened by his gaze. The one gave a surprised thanks. The head of the family asked if Ver was here. The man shouted that he was here, falling to his feet behind him. The man asked again where Ver was. Arad told him that behind him. Earl Burton told Vera that he had a good son, quiet and listened while his elders talked. Usually kids are not like that. The father apologized. Arad thought that this way he is already in his 30s. The count said he would contact him and that he should wait. The one agreed, bowing. Aria told the boy that they would see each other again. She wished him well. People were discussing that he had just won the favor of the count. His father told the hero that it had worked out well. He agreed. He thought that this was how it was, that he really was an aristocrat, that their house was so poor that he didn't feel it. In the crowd of people was Robin. He was terribly angry. A few days passed. The hero wandered through the forest again, gathering herbs. He found a mushroom and put it in a basket. Suddenly he saw something. Ahead of him was a rabbit. Arad thought that even though he was careful, he still didn't run away, and thought that the hero was only a child. That's why he was so inattentive. He thought that people don't hunt rabbits in the mountains, and now he was as vulnerable as possible. He started to use magic in his hand. The hero thought that he should act very, very carefully, and most importantly not attack in the open. He decided that he was throwing and used a fireball. It hit the target and the rabbit was thrown upwards. It fell lifelessly to the ground. Arad was glad that he had managed to get it down. He thought about the fact that he had succeeded, that with magic he could now not only gather but also hunt. A glowing ball of light appeared next to the rabbit. The hero was very surprised and reached out to pick it up. Arad didn't understand why it wasn't disappearing and assumed it was because it was a fragment of his own magic, or it was because he had already learned how to throw a fireball. The hero decided that he should look for more. Making his way through the forest, he managed to find another fragment. The boy looked around. He thought that it looked like wind magic, that it didn't leave any marks or burns, and it didn't look like fire magic in the least. He held out a shaky hand, hoping that when Arad touched the orb, it was gone. The hero became frustrated. He thought that if this was a new magic, it seemed he could learn it. He reached the town and walked down the street humming. The boy approached a man and asked if he could be visited. The man agreed and asked if he was helping his mom. The boy said yes. He held out a rabbit carcass and asked if he could sell it. The man said it was a mountain rabbit. He asked if the man could sell it himself. He said that it was not bleeding and the carcass was quite fresh. He asked how the hero was able to get it. The man decided to answer. Hearing this, the man shouted loudly about magic, and that here was the boy giving. The one replied that magic is the most ordinary. The man said that he, the old man, had achieved nothing in 40 years, that the hero was lucky to get such power from the gods. Arid laughed and asked what about the meat. The man replied that he did not know. He asked if the little one would be able to bring it regularly. Arid agreed and said he thought he could. The man said that this is the spirit and no other is expected of a magician. He gave the boy a pouch and said that this was for him, and if he brought it often he would add more. The hero thanked. He waved goodbye. The man said to be careful on the way home. Arad was very surprised at the bag of coins for the rabbit, as for the herbs he would gather all day. He could not believe that he had earned so much. He thought about the fact that this was not some pay raise, that it was all thanks to magic, that with its help each step he took would become bigger than the previous one. Arad said there it was, the magic. He held coins in his hand. He thought that the more magic he used, the better life he would have in this world, that it was a strange life hack. He decided that he would start by looking for fragments. The boy thought about how the city was so huge, he would surely be able to find them there. The hero walked all over the city, through the nooks and crannies, looking for fragments of magic. He thought that this could not be possible, that he had gone to so many places but had found none. The hero sat there wondering why this was so. Suddenly someone shouted that enough is enough. The guy said that he had done so much and asked the girl to take a walk with him just once. She replied that she had already told him she didn't agree. The guy grabbed her hand and told her not to talk nonsense. The hero thought why such are in any world that you can't hit in the open. He thought that he would deliberately miss and distract him, and then he would see. Suddenly there was a shock of wind. That guy was thrown upward, causing him to let go of the girl's hand. This blow was made by a magician who appeared. He said it was indecent and for the guy to stop. The guy was surprised and said he would kill him. The mage used the wind punch again. His attack flew, breaking the boards. The guy landed on the boxes, breaking them. The mage asked the girl if she was all right. She answered in the affirmative and thanked him. He said thank goodness he wouldn't let anything happen to a beautiful girl like her. Ta became embarrassed. Arad at this time was picking up the glowing orb. He was surprised that there was only one orb. He thought about the same magician shooting it twice. The boy still didn't understand how the fragments worked. He assumed they appeared randomly. He thought about the fact that the city was so noisy, that you couldn't find a bunch of people using magic in such a peaceful place. He wanted to find a place where magic was used, or rather, a place where magic needed to be used. Suddenly, he remembered something. His mother had told Arad that the forest was terribly dangerous and not to go there for anything. The boy asked in surprise what was in the forest. She replied that it was full of scary monsters. He thought about how cute she was showing them off. She asked if he realized that he should never set foot in the forest. The hero thought about the forest. He decided it sounded more promising than the city. He figured he hadn't even gone near there until now. But now that he could use magic, if he didn't go, he wouldn't know. Arad decided that he would go there. On the way, he saw people in black standing by the tomb. Grandfather said that if they had known sooner, they could have cured him with magic, that everyone talks about a miraculous power. But when needed, it is not there. He said that just a couple of revitalizing charms would have sufficed. He was answered that you can't say such a thing, that it doesn't work that way and life is given by God. The hero looked at this and listened. He said that it did not seem to be so. He thought about the fact that there were some things he thought about, while this body couldn't even stand on its feet yet. He thought he had a lot of time to think about it, and one of those things was the existence of the magic of life. Well, that is, whether there was a magic of revitalization or rebirth. He thought about the fact that this was a world of swords and sorcery, That for fantasy anime or games, this was a standard element, and since he now lived in such a world, answers to such questions were important to him. Basically, Arid thought so. There are both graves and funerals. He thought it was so good that he had learned about it, and he should be more careful. The hero walked into the woods. It seemed to him that the air here was different. He thought that even if his mom hadn't warned him, he wouldn't go near it without magic. Suddenly he heard footsteps. Arid realized that someone was approaching. He remembered people's words that only a couple of revitalizing charms would be enough, and that it doesn't work that way. The hero climbed into the bushes and shouted to show himself to whoever was coming. Looking in, he was shocked. Arid saw many monsters. He was frightened and thought there was a whole pack of them. While he was sitting quietly in the bushes, they passed by. He calmed down and said that they had frightened him. He thought of the woman who wept bitterly at the grave. The hero decided to get up from behind the bushes. He thought about the fact that he had been reborn in the new world and that he was no son. There were small monsters sitting in the trees. Arad, looking at them, thought that it seems that it is better to be extremely careful here. Suddenly, he started to fall down with a scream. The hero landed and heard some voices. He wondered if there was someone else here. He assumed there was a battle going on. The boy went forward and crouched down by a tree to observe. He was very surprised. He saw that two monsters opposite each other were yelling. A battle was going on between them. Arid thought that the special effects were so realistic. One of the monsters was very aggressive. Suddenly its head was struck. The hero realized that it was magic. It was used by the other monster. He screamed loudly and ran to the other side. The monsters went in the direction opposite to Arad's location. The one thought he was sweating. He was pleased to see a glowing ball of light. The boy looked around. He reached out his hand toward the balloon and it disappeared. Arad was glad that his goal had been accomplished. He thought about the fact that he had not taken a risk for nothing, that in the forests he had learned how magic was used. He thought that this was great progress. The hero noticed that it was already getting dark. He thought that the most important thing was not to overexert himself, and it was time to go home. Arad noticed something behind him. He looked closely and saw a faint light. He thought maybe he was imagining it, but then he was convinced that there was a glow. He said something was glowing and started looking for it in the foliage. Finally, he managed to find a fragment of magic. It seemed to the hero that he was about to disappear. He stretched his hand forward toward the ball. It disappeared in his hand. Arad was shocked. He heard that he had received a fragment of the ancient magic of raising the dead. He was very surprised and thought that the fragment of raising the dead was resurrection magic. He thought how it. People were looking at the crystal. Someone said that it was nice and hardly cloudy. He was answered that it was really beautiful. The boy asked if such a catch was not common. The girl said yes. The other guy suggested that he should go to the guild faster and trade it. Arad walked over to them and approached. The guy asked who the kid was and if he was lost. The one asked if there were any mages among them. The guy pointed at the girl and said that this pretty girl was a mage. She hit him on the head. The girl came down to the hero and asked what he wanted. The one replied that he wanted to ask something to someone who uses magic. He asked if she knew anything about ancient magic. The girl interjected. She asked the guys if they knew. They replied that they had no idea and did not know. She asked the boy what ancient magic was. He said that he had heard a man in town say that it was great that he had ancient magic, and that was why he wondered if there was such a thing at all. The guy laughed loudly and shouted that the man was just a crackpot. The girl said that magic of all kinds happens, but she had never heard of ancient magic either. The hero replied that that's how. He apologized for asking silly things. The girl said it was nothing. She said he had better go home soon, and that it was dangerous here. She asked if he should be escorted. Arad replied that he would reach it himself. They said goodbye. He thought about whether she really existed, that no matter who he asked, no one knew. He thought that if there was a Google now, just one click would be enough. He thought about how he missed the internet. Arad thought about how information and knowledge are so valuable in human society, even in another world, but because they are not as accessible, They are even more valuable here. The boy was drawing in the sand with a stick. He wiped it off with his foot and said that she probably really wasn't here. Robin came up to him and asked him what he was doing. The boy was surprised that his brother had already been drunk since lunch. He asked again. He asked about ancient magic and said that Irad was talking nonsense again. He told his brother to stop fantasizing about what he was even talking about and that he had never heard of ancient magic. He said for the hero to think less of nonsense and be more like him, improve himself. Arad agreed. Robin said that he was, now, close friends with Kevin. The boy agreed. Suddenly, someone greeted Arad. He saw Arya in front of him and asked why she was here. The girl replied that she wanted to show him something, so here she was. The hero was surprised. He remembered her saying that there was no way she would lose to him. Robin gave his brother a surprised nudge. He asked if they were the same. Arad was puzzled. The older brother said that Arad was still a kid, but he was already doing such a thing. The boy wondered if Robin was serious now, and why he was snickering. He asked if he remembered Count Louis. The older brother replied that it was only natural that they had been to his reception not too long ago. Arad agreed. He thought he was the worst of the worst. He thought about his brother remembering such an important person like the Count and his granddaughter's face and nailed that it was so much like Robin that if he had been an office worker, he would have been fired immediately. He thought it was offensive somehow. He noticed that Arya didn't care one bit about Robin's rudeness, and she didn't even bat an eye. Arad thought that it was good that he didn't offend her, but Robin is Robin. Suddenly the older brother saw a carriage, to which he was very surprised. He asked what it was and if it was a carriage. The man addressed the girl, calling her mistress. He said that she should not be alone. Arya said that it was all right, that she had magic after all. The man replied that it would not work that way. He asked what he would say to the Lord if something happened to her. The girl shouted that enough is enough. She asked Craig why he was making a fuss. Craig hesitated. Suddenly Robin looked at the crest on the carriage. He said, "Is this the carriage of the House of Louis?" He addressed Arya, calling her mistress. Arad thought that at last the latter understood, and that his brother break. Robin turned to Mrs. Arya and said that he was pleased to see her, that his name was Robin. The lady was surprised. She said that he was Arad's brother, that she was pleased to meet him. She asked the hero if he was done talking to his brother. The one replied that he seemed to be. He asked if she wanted to show him something. The girl said yes. She said this is what she came to show him, and turned to Craig. Arya began to recite a spell, creating a fireball in her hands. Craig held a piece of cloth in his hands, and the girl made a hole right down the middle of it. She asked Arad how Arad did it. He wondered and thought about what exactly. She said that he seemed to want more. The hero was puzzled. Arya said that you can't use magic for nothing. Toth thought it was as if she had gone into a strange mode. She said that using all the power at once was also undesirable, that it was important to be able to control one's own magic. Arad thought about the fact that he realized that this was how it was. He thought that when magic is preserved, it definitely becomes more concentrated. He saw Arya's work and thought that it was perfect. The hero thought that this is how it seems like she was trying really hard, all to demonstrate it to him. He thought it was such a small thing, but she had put a lot of effort. Arad replied that it was great, and one wouldn't expect anything else from Arya. The girl listened. She cheerfully said that it was still nothing special. The hero thought how happy she was. He turned around and didn't realize where Robin had gone, and when he had. Arya told the boy that if he wanted to, she would teach him so much too, that they both were already using fireballs. Top replied that he would agree if it wasn't too much trouble for her. He thought about how nostalgic it was to remember those times when he played as a child with his friends. Someone turned to Arad. It was Robin, and next to him was some guy. Robin asked to introduce the guy and said that this was Kevin, the man in charge of Caraft Street. The hero was surprised and thought that he was strange, and who could it be? Looking at Arya, he thought that there was some strange sense of competition here, and did he really want to compete with her? He thought that his face was giving him away everything. Arad thought about whose turn it was now, and what kind of atmosphere it was. Suddenly another carriage passed by. Everyone looked on in surprise. The carriage stopped and someone got out of it. It was Count Louis. Everyone was surprised and wondered what was going on. He said how many people were here. Noticing Robin, he asked if he was Arad's brother. The latter fearfully said yes. He said his name was Robin. The Count replied to keep the man going. The man thanked him. He suggested that Kevin go. Kevin agreed. As he left, Robin looked angrily at Arad. The hero thought it was necessary not to look at them. He thought that it must have hurt his pride as the eldest son, since he had already been called Arad's brother twice. Count Louis turned to Arya and asked why she was here. The girl replied that she had many things she wanted to talk to Arad about. After all, they both used the fireball. The Count replied that it was understandable and that she was eager to learn. The hero thought that she wanted to brag rather than talk. Tha asked why the Count was here today. The one wanted to answer something as his gaze went somewhere. He saw an inscription in the sand, to which he was very surprised. He asked who had written it. Arad replied that it was he. Count Louis asked how the man knew. The hero thought about the fact that he must have asked the wrong people, that information and knowledge were valuable, and naturally, aristocrats would have it. He thought about the fact that he was now convinced that the Count knew about an almost unknown ancient magic. Count Louis gave him a serious look. Arya turned to him. He said he would ask again. He asked how the boy knew about it. The man hesitated. He thought he couldn't ask him about ancient magic until he answered the question. He thought that such a person couldn't just lie to him, that he had such a pressing aura, and it was better not to tell him about the fragments. The hero replied that he would sort of say. He said that when he got hold of the magic, he heard a voice. He thought he sounded like he was guilty of something himself. Arya asked if it was the voice of a deity. Arad thought that whether it was heard by everyone who masters magic, and that it was fortunate. He said that this voice had told him so. Count Louis thought and calmed down. He said that this is how. The Count went somewhere. Arad was very surprised. He asked if the one was already leaving, thinking that the same one hadn't asked about ancient magic yet. Count Louis replied that he thought it was not a quick conversation and he would send him an invitation later. The boy agreed. The Count was surprised. He looked at Craig thoughtfully and asked if he was the only chaperone. Craig apologized. Arya shouted that Craig wasn't that at all, and she was the one who had acted selfishly. Earl replied that she was so smart. He said that they, aristocrats, have to keep their face. He asked if she understood. The girl answered in the affirmative. He said they were born to have status, and they don't go anywhere unaccompanied. That Louis was worried too. Arya apologized. At that time, Arad saw some guy behind the archway. He thought the guy was at the reception. The horses ran and the carriage with Count Louis drove off. Arya was sad. The hero looked at her. Craig asked her to keep her spirits up. Hero turned to the girl and asked if she would teach him that magic thing. She replied that she had said she would. Arya looked at her hand. Arad thought that maybe she was a little tired. The girl asked what he wanted to learn. The boy thought maybe he was wrong. Arya said she would teach her daddy too. When she was little, her daddy asked her to teach him how to tie a ribbon. The girl agreed and showed him how. She tied the bow and said it was done. Daddy said happily that it turned out great. Arya said she would teach her uncle too. Papa replied that it was not an uncle, but a brother. He wondered if her father felt the same way when she taught him. Arya turned to Craig. She told Arad that if you took a glass, for example, if you tilted it, water would spill out, and the level of the tilt would determine how much water would come out. She said that if we consider mana as water, then its amount when used can be adjusted. The hero replied that he understood. He thought about how it was just like the manga he read as a kid, and if you think about it that way, the manga was a straight-up guide to reality. Arya said that's why you have to do it like this, and used her magic. The ground warped violently and pieces of it flew upwards. Arya exhaled. Arad asked her if she was all right and if she was tired. The woman replied that one would not get tired of such a thing. She suggested that the hero try it now. The latter agreed. Craig watched them. Arad thought that he should not overdo it, but shoot relaxed as he usually did when hunting, and the main thing was not to overdo it. He stretched his arm forward. Magic began to manifest. He thought about channeling and control, and make it weaker than Aria's. He thought about taking things slowly. Something began to appear on his palm. He shouted, but nothing happened. The hero was puzzled. He thought the magic had bounced back, and maybe he had made it too weak. Arya told him not to get upset, that no one usually succeeds the first time. Arad replied that that was how it was, and thanked him. He thought about the fact that probably magic is even more tiring, and if used at his level. He didn't understand what she was so excited about. He thought that maybe controlling the magic put extra strain on the magic circuits, and the smaller the orb, the faster the magic is used up, and the more tiring it is, that if you diminish it to the limit, the magic itself won't hold up and will bounce back. He thought to try it out later when hunting, and so it proved useful. Suddenly Craig yelled for the mistress to run. The children were surprised. Craig was thrown into the air and fell to the ground. Arya yelled to him. Suddenly people appeared in front of them. Arya asked what they were doing. They were discussing whether this was the Malloy and that he fit the description. One of them said he couldn't have the boy hanging around like a pain in the ass. The girl pointed her hand, but nothing happened. She was puzzled and didn't understand why this was happening. Arad thought that the magic had run out, and he had already managed to shoot the fireball twice. He realized that it was a spell. After all, they were mages. One of the people was going over the crystals in his hand. The hero shouted to Arya and ran, taking her hand. The people discussed that he wouldn't run away. One said that he would. He raised his hand. The heroes managed to dodge, but Arad said it was close. They were out of breath. The boy thought the field was too open. The hero pointed his finger and said to run that way. Arya asked why. They ran into the bushes. The boy pointed a strong blast in that direction. The other said to watch that the boy would not die, and if they killed him, they would get hit. The one replied that he knew. The children hid. Arad covered Arya's mouth and told her to be quiet. After several attacks, the boy said and tired. One of them said that the boy didn't really die after all. Suddenly they noticed something. A huge pillar appeared out of the ground. The boys didn't realize what kind of ice pillar it was. There was smoke in the sky. Arya looked at it in surprise. Arad looked out from behind the bushes and watched. A loud scream was heard. Arad continued to cover Arya's mouth. The guy said that no matter how much they hid in the forest, the screams would give them away. The sound of an explosion was heard. Guy was shooting crystals. One of them almost hit the girl, and the hero had a hard time covering her mouth. The guy with the mask said it was getting fun. The other guy in the cape replied that he was getting too carried away. A lot of crystals landed a lot of crystals. Arad thought it was a bad thing. The boys discussed that they would get out sooner or later and that the boy really wasn't dying. They went somewhere. The hero was thinking about how things were too bad and he didn't know what to do. He was thinking that in Japan they wouldn't have killed him so sure. What is it that this can't happen? He was scared. He noticed a glow at the crystals. There were many fragments of magic around him. Arad rejoiced. He immediately went to collect them, waving his hands. Arya looked at it in bewilderment. When he touched another ball, he heard that the ice rock fragment had reached its peak and the mastery had passed. The hero thought joyfully that he had succeeded, and this was his only chance. The boy stretched out his hands and created a huge crystal that flew forward. It jabbed into the ground. The masked boy asked what the ice pillar was. Another wondered if the boy had the same magic as him. He asked if he wasn't the same one who used fireballs. Arad watched the situation from behind the bushes. He told Arya that they should run. She was surprised. They ran among the trees, holding hands. The hero said that the forest was the same as a garden, that it was okay, and they could run away. The girl asked why they were running away. She said that they could just get rid of those rascals. Arad replied that he could not let her get hurt. Arya interjected. She was embarrassed. Suddenly they were shouted at to stand. It was those three men. They were yelling that the brat had escaped. The hero realized that they were close. He thought about how there was no escape from them. The girl said they were catching up. Suddenly he heard something. He showed them where they should go, and they turned and kept running. The boys yelled that those kept running, but once they got tired they couldn't go on, and then they were finished. The girl turned to the hero. He replied that everything was fine and that she should not worry. They ran out into the open. Arad told Arya to hide, and they ran to the bushes. They huddled in the bushes. The girl wanted to say something, but the hero asked her to be quiet. She covered her mouth with her hands. The trio came out into the clearing. The masked guy asked where they had gone. He said that they must be close and for the others to look for them. The heroes tried to sit as quietly as possible. The masked guy started cutting through the bushes. Arya looked scared. Arad took her hand and looked at her with a smile. The trio looked up in surprise. The guy in the cloak asked what it was. A dragon-like monster appeared from behind the trees. The guy in the mask asked if this was the territory of the huge monster. He said he didn't know there were such things. It was decided to move away. Arad and Arya started to run away. They were spotted. The guy in the cloak offered to score on the brat. The one in the mask replied that they would not run away this time. The other yelled for them to run. Suddenly the monster struck its tail very close with the three. The children ran quickly through the forest. Arya looked at Arad. As they ran, someone was watching them from the branches of the trees. One said that that boy had made it. The other agreed. He said he realized they could not win and ran away. The one replied that the boy had pretended to run away and lured the monster into the lair, and children his age don't usually do that. He said he doubted that even an inept adventurer could do such a thing, let alone his age. The other agreed and said that so and so could. He said that because of the boy's cleverness they had no opportunity to show off and asked what they would do. The one asked if he meant that company. He said let them go and that they were not that good, and since the girl was all right they could go. The other one asked again if it was all right. The one asked what exactly. The other asked if his friend was catching up with him. The one replied that's why he was asking. The guy in the cap asked what to do if the count asked who the attackers were. He said it was her own fault for going out unaccompanied. And after all, it is not every day that a child of an aristocrat is attacked. He asked if the man thought the count wouldn't ask about who they were. The dark-haired boy thought that it would be bad then. He snapped out of his seat and shouted that he was on his way and not to die without him. The guy in the cap laughed. He asked if his friend knew how old the boy was after all. The man asked again and said about 6 years old. The other said that then the 6-year-old completely surpassed that one in assessing the situation. The boy shouted that this was not so and that it just happened to be so today. The other said that the boy would have laughed at him and asked if that was the case. He said the hero was a funny kid. Meanwhile, Arad ran for all he was worth. The entire ground was strewn with crystals after being attacked by them. Arad and Arya continued running forward, already out of breath. The girl shouted to Craig. He was lying on the ground unmoving. She stood in front of him and shouted asking if he had fallen asleep. Craig began to make some sounds. Arya turned to him. He jumped up and started shaking the girl, yelling for her to run away, that it was dangerous here. The girl wiped away her tears and told him that she was fine already. Craig looked around and asked what was wrong. Arad disagreed and said that it was still not safe here, that Craig should take Arya and run away quickly. The man turned to the boy in surprise. The hero said that he would not be surprised if they returned and that Arya and Craig should leave as soon as possible. The girl shouted to Craig. He said that the hero was right and suggested that the mistress hurry. The lady agreed. When they reached the town, Arad bade them farewell as they rode away in a carriage. Suddenly, Arya opened the door and ran out. She ran up to the hero. He turned to her in surprise. He asked her what was wrong. She, embarrassed, thanked him for saving her then. Arad was surprised. He thought about whether she had seriously come back on purpose to thank him, that she was so proper, and it was no wonder. After all, that was the upbringing of aristocratic girls. He thought that he would have cried if he had such an older brother. Arya stood silently. He turned to her and asked if it would be long. The girl asked to listen. She embarrassedly said he was cool. The boy interjected. He said that the clothes were now rather not cool but dirty. She said that's not what she was talking about. The hero interjected. Arya tried to explain, but faltered. He said he understood, and asked if she was surprised that he was cool. She was very embarrassed and blushing. She cried out asking what he was saying. Arya asked if it was something. The girl replied that it was not that at all. She yelled that if he kept pretending to be cool he would get in trouble, so she asked him to be more careful. Craig in the carriage was already getting angry. Arya went to him and told him to chase. The carriage moved off. Arya thought about how she was an aristocrat, that she would never say a barb, and so pleasant. He thought that he was treating Arya in a fatherly way more and more. The boy went out into the field to look around. He noticed that he was no longer being chased and thought that maybe the monster had slew them. The hero thought that if such a creature attacked, there must be no time to chase. He looked at his hand. The boy looked around to make sure no one was around. He thought about the fact that he didn't care, of course. But why do the mages of this world openly cast spells in public? Isn't it a bit childish for them to do so? Arad was a former Japanese who remembered how awkward it was to cast a spell right in the classroom. The hero exhaled and focused on magic. When he recited the ice rock spell, a small crystal embedded itself into the ground. He thought about the fact that it was only 20 or 30 centimeters. He wondered if that was the full power, and that it seemed like whoever had attacked them had about the same. He looked at his reflection in the crystal. Arad remembered the magic fragments around the enemy's crystals. He thought that with so many fragments, magic could be learned in no time. Fireballs were flying, explosions were going off. It was monsters fighting. Arad was now standing in that spot. He stood in the middle of the crater with his hand up, surrounded by fragments of magic. The hero turned around. He thought that if he did such a thing, he could accumulate as many fragments as he could fit, but it wouldn't take long to die. He thought he was starting to fantasize in an already playful fantasy world. Sitting on a rock and looking up at the sky, he said that you can't risk your life like that. He thought it was obvious. Arad thought about the fact that if ancient magic existed, and even if he could learn revival magic, he wouldn't be able to use it on himself. When he played games, he would get upset that the hitman had died and thought to himself that he would have applied the spell at least. He thought that still, healing and recovery magic were very different, and if it existed, it would be so great. The boy looked at the ice crystal he had created. He decided that he would stop thinking about magic beyond his control and start with the basics. The hero rolled up his sleeves. He thought that he should first try out the magic that he already knew. He thought that he was so lucky to master the magic associated with ice that both flame and ice could be changed in size. But however, ice, unlike flame, is a solid thing, and changing its shape is easier. He sat and thought to concentrate and visualize. He thought of ways to make the ice thinner, longer, and stronger. He got a sword made of ice. Arad was glad that it worked. He thought it took time, but he was able to change the shape, and assumed that if he practiced, he could do it faster. The boy looked at the sword. He saw his reflection in it and thought that now it seemed to be troubled by something after all. The hero did not realize what it could be. He stuck the sword into the ground and decided that he needed to reproduce the same flow as before. He concentrated and began to use magic. The sword appeared in his hand again. He realized that it was a matter of time, that it was disturbing to him that he was wasting time. Arad wondered if it should take less time if he applied mana. He remembered that Arya also needed time to create even a small fireball. Suddenly an idea about time came to him. He thought that if his theories were correct, it should work, so he began to recite the spell. Pointing his hands forward, the boy used the ice rock. Unexpectedly for him, nothing happened. He pondered. Suddenly, someone called out to him. A guy with dark hair said that the hero appeared to be still here. He started to say something about that huge lizard in the forest as suddenly a hissing sound was heard. The ice chunks started to create a three-dimensional figure. The guys looked at it with astonishment. The figure began to increase in size and fell to the ground. Arad realized that he had succeeded. The block of ice stuck into the ground and stood like that between the boys and the two boys. They were shocked. The hero tried to justify himself somehow. The guy with dark hair asked if he could create delayed spells at that age. A block of ice was lying on the ground. A guy with dark hair asked Arad if someone had taught him. The hero thought about what he was getting. This was not something that children could normally possess, and it was embarrassing that they had seen it. He wondered what he should do, and whether it would be better to dodge. That kid said that meant no one had taught him. He said that it was amazing that the boy managed to get hold of the delayed spell by himself. Arad disagreed. The boy marveled that the boy had not learned such a difficult spell from anyone. The other said the boy had great talent. The hero tensely said that someone had taught him. The boy said with a smile that he was lying. The boy was surprised and did not realize how he had been exposed. The boy said that because the one was poor. Suddenly he got a smack on the head from the other. The man in the cap asked the one why he didn't know the reason and acted like that. The one, holding his head, agreed. He apologized to the boy and said that he had never had any thought of offending him. The boy in the cap asked him to apologize and that he really didn't mean to offend him, just acting lightly. Arad replied that it was okay, thinking about the fact that he was not just poor after all, but insanely poor. The guy with dark hair said he would teach the boy something as an apology. He asked him to wait. He held out his hand and recited a spell, then offered the hero to try a light touch. Arad asked if this was the place to touch. He tentatively stretched his hand forward as he was suddenly pulled back. The boy asked how he felt and if he was surprised. The boy asked what it was. The man in the cap turned to him and asked him to listen. He asked the boy if he was teaching now or showing off. The boy became indignant. He said that if the fellow was teaching, he should explain normally. At this time, the hero was looking at his hand, not understanding what should be done. The fellow suggested that he should start again. He said that the delayed spell that the one used should work by itself after a certain amount of time. He said that he now showed how he stopped the spell from triggering. He said that the trigger for triggering was not time, but momentum. Arad thought he understood, and if you change the conditions for triggering the spell, you can make it switchable instead of time. He thought that magic was something even similar to programming, and that it was interesting. The hero stood up and began to read the spell. At first he thought that guy was useless, but it turned out to be a great teacher. He thought, being under the head of the family isn't just about bragging. It turns out, the guy in the cap told the boy that his concentration of power was amazing after all. The boy apologized and said that he had accidentally made it too long. The boy disagreed and said he was just admiring. He said the hero seemed tired, but his mana was still fine. He asked if the boy minded if he asked him something. The boy asked what it was. The boy asked if it was that he was attacked by those 3 strange guys. Arad said yes. The boy with dark hair asked if he knew who they were. The boy replied that he didn't know so. The block of ice was already melting. The boys looked at each other. The boy asked why he. The dark-haired boy said that in case of anything, Earl Burton had told them to stay to look after the girl. Arad realized why they were here. He was asked if it reminded him of anything. He shook his head in the negative. The boy said that this was how it turned out, and that it was getting evening. A man with dark hair stroked the hero's head and said they would go. The other told him that Arad was also an aristocrat actually. The man replied that the boy was now his good student. After saying goodbye, the boys left. The hero thought that the next time he met the man he should thank him well, so he decided to continue the lesson. The hero used magic and fell on his back, oohing and ahhing. He thought that this must be the hardest thing he had ever had to do. He thought that in addition, he couldn't see it, which meant it was even more difficult to deal with. And he wouldn't know if he was doing it right, and practicing it wasn't effective at all. He pondered how to do it better. Arad thought that it should be safe in the forest by now, that it would be dark for a little while longer. No practice could be better than real use, he thought, and he would learn by doing. The sun was setting over the horizon. The next morning came. Arad noticed a rabbit under a tree, to which he was very glad. He joyfully held its carcass in his hands. He thought that everything was just as he wanted it, that it was a good decision to set this thing as a trap and be in double plus, and by the prey one could tell whether he had done right or wrong. He thought about the fact that not to mention battles, there is no better spell to set traps, and he will set it again. Arad used the spell. He wondered what had worked out in other places. He saw an empty trap and said that here the beast must have dodged. He thought that it seems that this place was not the best, and should have been rearranged a little. Arad moved further into the forest. There were beautiful webs in the trees. Suddenly he took a step, and a trap activated, nearly injuring himself. The boy thought that if magic is set correctly, it seems that it doesn't turn off by itself, and progress with traps is in sight. Behind the hero's back was the carcass of a rabbit. He ran happily, humming and thinking, now that's a catch. He went into town. Reaching the market, he took the rabbit to that man. The man looked happy. Arad received a sackcloth for the rabbit. He was surprised and thought that the proceeds had skyrocketed, that he could make a lot of money this way. Suddenly he thought about his mom. The boy decided that since that was the case, he should buy some kind of gift. He walked through the market. Continuing on his way, the hero crossed a field, a bridge, and finally reached home. He was very surprised that no one had returned yet, looking at the device. He thought of it as a device for detecting people using magic, and when a pulse is applied to the switch on the input, a small fireball is triggered. The candle in the bowl notifies when people come and go. The boy looked at the device in wonder. He went inside and said he was home. Looking at the device, he was surprised that it did not work. The hero thought something was wrong with the switch. He looked and did not understand why the candle did not light. He thought about having said it this morning, that magic couldn't evaporate like that suddenly, yet there was no sign that the switch had been activated. Arad assumed that it had not evaporated on its own, but someone had eliminated it. He wondered if such a thing was possible, and if it were in the game, it could be a spell that nullifies magic. He didn't understand why this was happening. Suddenly he remembered that trio, and how the guys had asked if he knew who they were. The hero thought that really, they were targeting him. Morning came. Robin came into the room, yawning. His mother wished him good morning. He looked at the table and resented the black bread on it again. He asked if there was any wheat. His mother apologized and said there was only such a thing today. The young man replied that black bread was not tasty. He sat down at the table and reluctantly shared the bread. Arad thought that Robin had been the only child in the family for too long, so he had become so selfish. Someone knocked on the door. The hero was very surprised. He did not understand what kind of guest could be at such an early hour. Mom asked in surprise who was there. The hero thought about the need to be vigilant because of yesterday, and behind his back he prepared his hand to attack with magic. There was a man standing outside the door. He apologized and said that they were having breakfast here. He asked if this was Mr. Faith's house. Robert, chewing bread, looked at him in surprise. Mother said that was correct and asked who he was. The man apologized again and said he was a representative of Earl Burton. The whole family was shocked and stared at him. Robin asked if the man was a messenger from the main house for him. Arad was surprised that his brother didn't even question. Papa told the young man to calm down. Robin asked him what was wrong. The hero thought he really had the makings of a big aristocrat. The man looked at them. Everyone was silent. The father said his name was Ryan, that he was the head of this house and apologized for his son's behavior. He asked what brought the man here. The man replied that it was an invitation on behalf of the Earl to fulfill a promise Sir Burton had made to Arad. Robin was shocked. He said that was how it was, and moved forward. The hero looked surprised. Robin moved forward with a shout as he suddenly stopped. His father took him by the hand. The man asked what was going on. The father told Arad that he had heard everything. The boy agreed and replied that he was ready. The father told him not to keep the man waiting and set off. The doors were closing. Robin screamed and tried to break free, but Mom and Dad held him tight. The doors closed. Because of the noise, the hero looked back. The man apologized for the inconvenience. The boy asked again. The man replied that his carriage was unable to enter the village for some reason. Arad replied that it was no big deal. They reached the carriage. The Count's representative invited the hero to get up. The latter looked at the carriage in surprise. He started to rise and apologized. He got down and began to take off his shoes. The man said that the one could keep his shoes on. The hero embarrassedly apologized. The carriage set off on its journey. The boy looked out of the window. The spokesman said that his brother was very angry at that moment. The man interjected. The man said it seemed the character was very concerned for those around him. He asked why that was so. Toph thought that the man was watching him, and as expected, he was not so simple. He said that the man was a messenger of the Count, that he would have no escort, so he thought that it might encourage his brother to do rash things. The latter replied that the boy was as shrewd as he was said to be. He said that it was true that if the hero's brother had clung to him then, it must have been an inconvenience. Toph laughed nervously. He thought he was sure there must be an escort somewhere around the carriage itself. The man said that Arad was not at all conceited about having gained magic being so young. Besides, Sir Burton had not hesitated to meet him, that the whole mansion was buzzing with rumors about him. The boy was embarrassed. He thought that he was even scared that he was being praised so much, and whether it was really so. The man said that maybe he was presumptuous, but asked to be allowed, as the Count's butler, to ask the hero for something. The man asked what the matter was. He said that the hero, though young, was still an aristocrat. He said that he would like him to behave in accordance with his position in front of others. The boy did not understand and apologized. He remembered squatting. He said that he understood. The butler replied that it was wonderful. Arad thought it was a heavy burden for a former Japanese who grew up in a hierarchical society based on seniority and hard work. A castle appeared out of the window. The hero was surprised. The man asked what was. The boy asked if the road had changed. The butler asked again, and then, realizing what was the matter, said that they had entered a toll road. The hero asked what toll road meant. The butler explained that it had been laid out by the Count in conjunction with some merchants solely for transportation with horses, that it was a system of charging tolls in exchange for constant maintenance. Arad was surprised and thought it was similar to high-speed highways. He did not understand how one could personally take on such a project for which the country had a huge budget. He thought that nothing is impossible for the aristocracy. Butler asked how the hero noticed it. The man replied that obviously the way they were traveling had changed. The man thought that the boy was also very observant. The hero was looking out the window. He noticed something and shouted for the carriage to stop. The butler knocked the coachman and asked the hero if something had happened. The man had already run away. Arad ran down the road and reached a pit. He thought it was. Everything was strewn with fragments of magic. He assumed they were all fragments of the same magic. The boy was surprised by this and reached forward. He heard that the invisibility fragment had reached its peak, and the mastery had passed. The man approached and asked him what was the matter. The man replied that it was nothing. The butler, covering his mouth with his hand, looked up. They set off to drive on. Arad looked at his hand on which a star-shaped pattern had appeared. He marveled and thought that those lines on the palm of his hand were like another person's, and they weren't even lines anymore. He assumed that invisibility was a magic that changed appearance. He wondered what its meaning was, that this magic was quite different from the previous ones, and where it even came from there. The butler asked if something had happened. The hero asked again. The one said he had a face as if his cherished wish had come true. Arad asked in surprise if it was true. The butler said that it seemed so to him. The boy replied that it was nothing of the sort, thinking that in general it was so. He pondered about invisibility. He thought about the fact that he had dreamed of such magic, that if he studied magic at this rate, he would very soon pass the age threshold, and the only way to get magic was to be baptized on his birthday in the first place. He thought that meant acquiring more than 7 magic in his 6 years was theoretically impossible, that such a thing simply could not happen. He thought about wishing for something that would solve that problem. The hero thought that with invisibility magic he could do it, and that he could use it to change the appearance of magic. They were already closer to home. Finally, the carriage arrived at the house of the head of the family. The boy marveled at the carriage and the fact that they had gotten there before it got dark. Suddenly he heard barking. It was a Dalmatian, which Arad immediately began to squeeze. The butler asked if he liked it. The man asked if they could look at the place. The man interjected. The coachman asked if they were going somewhere else. The hero said he was about the place where he stopped halfway. He said he thought there was something hidden there. The butler was shocked. Arad thought that judging from his reaction, there really is something there. As he looked around the house, Arad thought that he certainly understood everything, but not so much that he was so rich. He thought that as one living in poverty his eyes ached. A knock was heard from the door. 3 maids came in and apologized. One of them said that this was the second brew of the best tea from the tea plantations. The little maid looked at the hero. He was puzzled. He asked if something was wrong. The girl fearfully apologized and said that she didn't mean to. She apologized and said that she seemed to get too excited about being able to meet the rumored person and asked him to excuse her. Arad asked again about the rumors. The maid said that the whole mansion was talking about him now, and many people said they had heard about his successes and would like to see him. The boy replied that this is how it means. The maid said that the truth apologizes for the girl and she will be reprimanded later. The hero disagreed and shouted that it was even too much. The butler remarked that it was aristocratic. Arad exhaled. He said he didn't mind, and that he would also meet with the others who wanted to see him, if, of course, the count would be okay with it. The maids were embarrassed. One of them said that he was even better than they said of him. The tea was ready. The hero thought that he was not very good at acting firmly, and he was tired of formal speech. Someone entered the room and said that the hero was so young and quite innocent. A frightened Arad apologized and asked who it was. The man replied that he was and only a guest in this house. The boy said that he was Arad Senver. The man said he was a funny little fellow. The hero asked if he was really funny. Said that his every gesture reeked of politeness. He said it was as if this behavior had been ingrained in his body for years, that his upbringing was good but still different from aristocratic. That's why he was funny. The hero was embarrassed. He thought about the fact that he used to be often told that he, as a Japanese, was very polite in business meetings with foreigners, and now he was being told that in the other world as well. He asked if wanted something. Thoth agreed and replied that he wanted to talk about what the boy had asked Joseph, the butler. Arad interjected. Asked how he realized that the butler was hiding something. The hero realized it was about the road. He said that he could see the marks from the use of magic, thinking that he knew already from the moment he told the butler about it how he would answer if asked. Asked if he could see such a thing. The boy answered in the affirmative. He thought that only the truth should be told, and that standing around and crumpling was not a good idea right now. Said that it was rare, and you don't see this kind of thing often. The hero asked if that was true. The man asked if he would see such a thing as well, after which he raised his hand. Arad saw a fragment of magic, and asked if it was at feet. The man said that the man did see them properly. The hero became embarrassed. Suddenly startled, he saw something from beyond the door. Earl Bertrand entered the room. Arad bowed before him. The count asked what he thought. The one replied that this child indeed sees the marks of magic, that he even guessed the one he had deliberately not told. The head of the family replied that it was a good job. Yem laughed and said it was no big deal. He told the boy that they would talk to him again sometime. The boy enthusiastically agreed. The Earl of Burton stood at the window, and the hero looked at him. The Earl asked if there had been deliberate negligence or mistake. He said that there had been suspicions about building work for some time. Arad thought he was talking about the place where there were fragments of invisibility magic. The head of the family said that if it was just Suhai, it wouldn't matter if they left it as it was. But since concealing magic was involved, it was a different story that he decided to send experts to investigate everything. The boy hesitated for a moment. The count told him that he had done a good thing. The man thanked. The count looked at him and pondered. He said that Ver had brought up the boy well and invited him to sit down. Thoth thanked. He stood by the chair for a long time. The count asked what was the matter. Arad replied that it was nothing, that it was Millet, for if he did anything foolish, his father's reputation would suffer. He said that he was very careful now. The head of the family wondered what he thought about this at such an age. The hero thought that he had a brilliant opposite, meaning his brother. He said that he had been told before about what it was to be an aristocrat, and from the moment they are born on earth, they live carrying the name of their family, their house, land, people, and every step become the reputation of their family. Earl Burton replied that this is exactly so, even after life comes to an end. He said not to forget it. The boy sat meekly and the head of the family smiled. The hero thanked for the treats. The count suggested moving on to their main objective for the day. Arad agreed, thinking about the main issue. The man asked if the man knew his title. The boy asked if it was Sir Burton or not. The earl replied that it was not that, and it was a generic name. He said that now he is often called Earl Burton, but originally he was so and so Earl Burton. The boy replied that he understood. He thought about the fact that in Japan things are often derived from place names, such as the Date family from the Principality of Sendai, and you get Mr. Date from the County of Sendai. He thought that he had never heard of such a lineage, and that was the result of the research. He apologized and said he did not know. The count said that he was in charge of the Meteor Strike County. The boy thought that Meteor Strike was something that was terribly useful in boss fights and all that. The count said that of course he knew, for it was the name of an ancient magic. Arad was very surprised and shouted, asking what ancient magic was. The man interrogated. The boy said that he thought it was some kind of cool magic, thinking about where he had reacted like that. The head of the family suggested going back to the story. The boy agreed. The count told him that in fact, all the current titles of earls and dukes are actually related to the names of magic that once existed. He said that, however, everything is now obsolete, so that now when one hears the title Meteor Strike, very few people realize that it is ancient magic. Arad replied that this was the case, and reflected. He turned to Sir Burton. The latter responded. The hero asked if there was anything he was protecting by being the Earl of Meteor Strike. The Thoth wondered. The boy thought it was only a guess, but if such a thing existed, then it must be the key to ancient magic. The man said that so-and-so had one place. Arad was very surprised. He thought it was bingo. Arad asked passionately where it. The Earl of Burton looked at him gravely. The boy apologized for behaving impolitely. The Earl's friend laughed. He said there was nothing wrong with being curious, and he seemed to have a particularly inquisitive mind. The boy became embarrassed. The count said it was a good opportunity and he would like to show him the place. The hero asked if the point was that one could not. The head of the family said that the title of the land and the meteor strike had been entrusted to him by His Majesty, and he could not make the decision on his own. The boy sadly said that means it won't work. The count asked to give him a couple days. Arad was shocked. The count said that he would get permission. He suggested that the hero stay at the estate and asked if they had an agreement. The hero happily agreed. He gave thanks. He thought about the fact that this place is probably related to the magic of the meteor strike. He thought about the fact that the title of count turned out to be the name of magic, which meant that the connection between the title and the name of the principality wasn't that far from the truth. He couldn't believe that this was directly RPG in real life. Someone knocked on the door. The hero allowed entry, wondering who it was this time. The little maids came in, saying that the count had ordered them to look after him. They said they were at his service. The boy agreed, thinking of the fact that they were all children. One girl said she would be glad to help him. He thought that this girl was really as small as he was. Everyone was silent. Arad wondered what to do now. He turned to them. The girl responded. The boy asked why they were here. The girl said that they would take care of him, so he could feel free to ask anything he wanted. Arad realized that they were waiting for instructions. He asked if the room he could stay in was already ready. The maid replied that it was, and they would show him. He thought he could stay alone in the room. They all walked down the corridor together. The hero thought about the fact that after all, in this world, ordinary things are so unfamiliar if you take even the way they do their work. Suddenly a scream was heard. One of the girls fell down. The hero wanted to ask if she was okay, but the other maid shouted at her, asking what she was doing. She yelled how annoying she was to get up. The girl was begging for forgiveness. She was yelled at to get up already, and what was she procrastinating about? Arad looked at this. The maid showed him the room while the fallen girl was being told off in the hallway. The hero went to the window. The girl brought him tea. The other shouted at her that the pen should be the other way. In Japan, Arad saw a guy ask another guy if he realized what he had done wrong. The other guy apologized. The guy said no apology. He shouted for the one to be quiet. Arad, who was sitting nearby, thought about how he didn't feel a bit. He put the food down and turned to that guy, asking for the bill. Arad asked the maids if he could ask a question. One of them agreed and asked what was. He asked why they were always yelling in front of him. The girl was surprised. The other said something about a younger girl. The hero asked if they also raised their voices in front of any other. The maid looked frightened. She said she didn't and wanted to justify herself. The boy said it turns out they ignore him. The maids bowed and said they apologized, which they didn't mean at all. They looked angrily at the younger girl. The hero exhaled. He said they were free to go. The girls agreed. The maid took the little girl and said they were going. Arad turned to her and told her to stay. The others looked at them in surprise. The boy asked if they had any objections. They replied that they did not and apologized and then left the room. The hero sat down on the bed. He wondered if he had behaved like an aristocrat now. He thought he had felt it in his past life, the upset over unwarranted criticism, and it seems he had just lashed out at them. He thought he even understood Robin now, and it really is awfully hard to control oneself. The girl turned to him. He said he was all right and asked for some black tea to be made, adding that his throat was dry. The maid agreed. He asked her not to worry and told her to better calm down and do things slowly. The girl questioned in surprise. The boy said that when making a mistake that can be corrected, you should just fix it. She agreed. He asked if she was new here. The maid replied that she had been here since last year. He said she was still so young. He said he understood her, that the first year was the hardest, that he himself was new. He had a very bossy boss, and when too much is demanded at once, you can start to panic. He said that he himself was better at coordinating his subordinates. He kept an eye on his subordinate and thought that he would not ask too much, as long as the subordinate did not realize why the hero had such a strange face. The girl was surprised. Arad asked her to ignore it and said that it was him and himself. The tea was ready. The boy said with a smile that it was perfect. The maid thanked. The hero thanked for the food and said that the point of being a rookie is not to make mistakes but to learn. And people forget the times when they couldn't do something themselves. The girl turned to him. She asked why he was so kind to her, but then embarrassedly apologized and said it was nothing. Arad asked if it was definitely nothing. He thought that she seemed to be getting bolder, and it would be good if she became less frightened and worried. The next morning came. The hero woke up thinking about how his lower back hurt, that he was too used to sleeping on the floor, and his body no longer accepted a soft bed. He walked with difficulty to the window. Seeing 3 maids in it, he wondered what they were doing. The adult maids came in and wished Arad a good morning. He replied the same and asked what was going on in the front yard. The maid apologized for the noise. She said it was about Clax, the girl who had tended to him yesterday. She said that today was the girl's birthday, and by divine revelation she had received magic. Arad was very surprised and asked if it was true. The maid was brushing the hero's hair. He was thinking about how he couldn't settle down. In the meantime, the other maids were making his bed. Sitting in front of the mirror, he thought that he couldn't get it into his head in any way. He asked if the girl's name was Clax. The older maid said that it was. Arad asked if she was still in the temple. The maid replied that she had already returned to the manor. The hero said that he understood and that he wondered what magic she had gained. The girl replied that she did not know that herself yet. The hero said that she was a serious girl and that he hoped the magic would be useful to her. The other girl said resentfully that this annoying girl was doomed to fail. Everyone remained silent. She covered her mouth with her hand. The girls stood awkwardly and stared. Arad asked the adult maid where Clax was now. The woman replied that she would take him. She turned to May and told her to go to Joseph. She was very surprised. The maid told her to go. May sadly agreed and ran away. Arad asked if Joseph the butler was the same butler who had brought him. The maid replied that he was, and sometimes he lectures them. The hero asked if this Joseph was a scary man and said that somehow it was hard to imagine. The maid replied that as long as they do the job well, he takes care of them. The hero thought he couldn't deny it and you could see it in his eyes. The maid motioned Arad to go to the inner courtyard. They walked in silence down the corridor. They went down the stairs and came to the window. Outside the window, the hero saw people. They all surrounded Klax. Arad was surprised to notice that the girl looked scared. They went outside. A guy with dark hair stood at a pillar and greeted the hero. He thanked the guy for helping him then. Toth asked him to stop and said he forbade the boy from behaving that way to him, tittering. He asked if Arad had heard about that girl. The boy nodded and said that they say she got magic. The boy replied that she had, and asked if he wanted to take a look. He said she had gotten magic, but no success with spells yet. The hero asked in surprise if that was true. The guy said that everyone here had tried to tell her what was what. The boy asked how many times she had tried. The boy said that as soon as she came back, she tried all the time. The hero was surprised. The boy asked why he was wondering. Arad replied that it was nothing, and just because. He remembered Irma's words that he had even guessed the magic he had failed. The boy thought that was what that old man had said yesterday, which meant that there were fragments left over from a failed spell, and those fragments that he had touched but could not reassemble must have been failed magic. Arad stood next to the courtyard. He thought that he still did not understand some aspects of the appearance of the fragments. He didn't understand why still not a single fragment had appeared no matter how much she tried. Suddenly, Klax saw him. She turned away abruptly. The other mages surrounding her looked in his direction. They noticed Arad. One girl said that here he was definitely from the younger branch of the Count's family. He was surprised. The boy said that it was natural since Arad was his apprentice. The boy thought he had a bad feeling and all was clear with him. Klax was pushed forward by another girl. The boy also pushed the hero and told him to go. The one thought that of course the guy was sending him off with that face, and inside he had actually been a grown man for a long time. He thought that he still understood him, and if he himself had seen such a scene with the kids, would also stand smiling. Klax wished Arad a good morning. He wished her good morning too and wished her a happy birthday. The girl thanked him embarrassedly. He asked if it was true that she had gained magic. She answered in the affirmative. The hero asked what kind of magic it was. The girl became embarrassed. He said he would like to try it too. She remained silent. Klax said that she was not at all good at it yet, that she was shy, that she would suddenly make a mistake. Arad said he understood, and she was afraid of making a mistake, and therefore not using her at all. He asked if that was the case. The girl was very surprised. She tried to prove that it was not so. The hero thought about the fact that it was, since the fragments never appeared. He said she could fix it. She interjected. He repeated that in making a mistake that could be fixed, you could just fix it. He smiled broadly. Klax was embarrassed and looked away. She said then she would try, for Arad's sake. The girl began to recite the spell. Everyone looked at her. She was climbing up, continuing to recite the spell. She aimed her magic at the boy. Everyone looked at them in surprise. Arad was surprised. He seemed to glow. The character thought about the fact that he had been playing for over a quarter century, and he had gone through many RPG games before the rebirth, and the most important thing in RPG is teamwork, and he most often chose mages. He thought about being a mage who buffed the others. He remembered that a buff is such a temporary addition of statuses to characters during combat with magic that it is one of the most important elements in defeating strong enemies, and if someone uses buffs, he is still far from being a real gamer. Klax looked at Arad in surprise. He thought that there was no visible change, but she used magic on him, which means it's some kind of healing magic or buff. He asked what kind of magic it was. The girl said it was speed magic. The hero was surprised. He started running from side to side and jumping, then realized that he did not get any faster from it. He pointed his hand into the air and used a fireball. The ability instantly rushed upwards. Everyone stared in surprise at what was happening. Arad shouted happily to the girl that his spell had become insanely fast, that this was the magic she had. Klax said it wasn't such a big deal. He disagreed. The hero said that he was the one who buffs, so he knows that the first thing he did at the beginning of the fight was to put on the buffs, And only with them did the real game begin. That being able to increase speed was very cool, and it was important to act faster than the opponent. Klax was perplexed. He shouted that it was the most important magic. The girl was embarrassed. A guy with dark hair appeared. He said that Arad was right, that this magic was strong. She was told that the magic that increases the speed of spells, although not popular, is unique, that it is the magic that can become the core of defense, that if the Count found out that she had gotten hold of such magic, he would pay 50 times more than an ordinary maid. Klax looked frightened. Arad smiled and showed her, "Class," she smiled. Said there are so many kids with magic this year. One of the mages said that she wished she had magic at their age. A boy with dark hair turned to Arad. The man asked what was wrong. He said to look ahead. There was an angry Arya. She walked up to Arad and greeted him. He said hello too. He asked why she was here. The girl replied that her grandfather had something to give to Sir Burton, and she had come in his place. The hero asked if he had sent her. Arya said that he had. The boy said she looked so nice, and he thought she knew he was here, so she came to see him. Arya began to tremble. He said it was a joke. The girl looked very embarrassed and tense. Arad noticed that she was blushing. He turned to her and asked if she was okay. The girl answered in the affirmative and asked what was wrong. She screamed, asking for a better way to tell who was there. The hero looked at Klax and said that this girl worked here as a maid, that it was her birthday and she had gotten magic, so everyone was here to discuss. Arya understood everything. She asked the girl what her name was. The girl answered fearfully that she was Klax. The hero asked her what was wrong with her. The maid replied that Mrs. Arya had spoken to her, that she had seen her then at the feast. She said that Arya was brave and beautiful. Tuss smiled embarrassedly. Arad told the girl that magic united them, and suggested that they practice together. They were surprised. He told Klax that Arya was her senior in magic and more experienced, that she would be able to set an example for her, and he thought it would be great. Klax was very embarrassed and Arya felt good about being told that she was her senior in magic. One of the mages asked what would come of it. The girl replied that since there was a conversation about it, there was no turning back. Arya looked pleased. Arad asked Klax if it was great. She said yes and thanked her. Arya said then they would try. The hero, looking at the girls, thought about the fact that he had no doubt that Arya was very kind. He was sure that she only liked to show off because she tried hard. He thought that after all, she is an aristocrat, and even the title in her lineage comes from ancient magic. A guy with dark hair asked the boy who he would choose. The other asked if it was never too late to be more aristocratic. A girl thought how mature he was for his age. The Earl of Burton came to the magicians and said that they seemed to be having fun here. Everyone wished him a good morning. Klax knelt down when she saw him. He wished her a good day's work. The girl agreed. The Count turned to Arad. The latter responded. He told the boy to get ready and that he had received permission. The hero was overjoyed. In the carriage they set off on their journey. The hero thought about how good it was that he could go to a place related to the meteor strike. Arya sat next to him, and he wondered if it was a place that needed permission from the king. But she was allowed to go with them. He looked at the Count. The one said that it was nothing that they had known Arya's grandfather for a long time. And yes, the Lewis family like theirs is of such a position that they are also protecting the inheritance. The hero said he understood, and the girl asked what they were talking about. The Count asked the girl to tell Arad about her title. The Ta agreed and said that it was Mana Hilaire. The boy thought about it and suggested that maybe it was magic that restores mana. He thought about the fact that there aren't many ways to restore mana in games, and some games don't have any magic for that at all. And it must be that ancient magic really is a rare thing. He replied that he understood. The girl asked what he understood. The girl asked Klax if she was still practicing. She replied that she was, and that the head maid had purposely given her the day off today. The girl told her not to overwork herself. Klax thanked. She read the spells, remembering the Count's words for her to do a good job. Arya's words that by practicing she would get better. The girl was thinking of Arad when suddenly something happened and she fell to the ground. There was a beautiful view of the mountains all around. The coachman started to stop the carriage. When the carriage stopped, Earl Burton turned to Orad. He asked him to explain to Arya about the titles. The girl was delighted. The head of the family was smiling, and the girl was ready to listen. The hero said that Arya said that her family's title was Mana Hilaire. She agreed. He started to talk about the title of Count. The girl said she knew it was a meteor strike. Arad agreed. He said that the title actually comes from the name of an ancient magic. She asked again about ancient magic. The boy said it was cool magic, but it was now lost. He said that somehow it was and looked at the Count with a question. The latter replied that it was right. Arya thought about ancient magic being cool magic. She asked if it had anything to do with where they were going. Arad replied that it did, and that place had something to do with the meteor strike. The girl said in surprise that she didn't know. She asked if there was a place that was related to the Mana Hilaire and added that she would have to ask her grandfather when she returned. The hero thought that she hadn't even considered whether or not she could use ancient magic herself. He thought about the fact that the Count had also asked him then how he knew about it, even though he hadn't mentioned it, and in this world magic is considered a divine gift, so no wonder. He thought about how it was good that they were going there, and maybe he could even get hold of her, that he was ready to get the enhancement, and it was purely an otaku's dream. Arad remembered his obtaining magic and turned to Sir Burton. He asked if the latter knew about the magic of raising the dead. The latter wondered about it. He said that raising the dead was the title of a duke. The boy thought that means a duke is above earls. He asked if there was a place related to the magic of raising the dead, since that was the case. The earl replied that there was no such thing. He said that a duchy combines several counties. Accordingly, dukes do not rule their territories directly. Arad thought about this. He was thinking that even if that was the case, why did he find a fragment of raising the dead in that forest? Suddenly, Arya shouted. The boy asked her what was wrong. She said she remembered that she had learned a new skill. He asked again. She said she almost forgot why she had come to see them. The hero asked if anyone had sent her to tell her something. The girl was embarrassed. She asked Sir Burton if she could show him something. The man replied that of course, and just as they were taking a break somewhere, they stopped, and the buffalo and the horse began to drink water. The Count and Arad sat down on a fallen tree. Arya began to recite an incantation, fire flaring in her hands. Suddenly, there was a loud cracking sound and everything broke off. The hero asked if she was all right. The head of the family said that it seemed to be quite a difficult skill. The boy said that if she keeps doing that, the magic will keep interrupting like that, and it's the 10th time she's done that. Arya told him not to worry and that she would succeed now. She began to recite the spell again, and a strong flame broke out. The flames took on the shape of a bird. Arya said that she had succeeded, and for all to see. Arad was shocked. The Count said it was excellent, and it was a fireball bird. The hero thought about how impressive it was. How could he have guessed to create something tangible out of formless flame? That unlike him who can use ice magic, Arya only uses fire magic. And although he is living in this world already with knowledge from manga and anime, but how inspiring it is. He thought that only a child could have such flexible thinking, and even having an idea. It takes effort to create it in reality. He said it was cool, impressive, which was as expected. Arya smiled. Earl Burton said she did a good job. There aren't many mages who can control their magic, and Louis must be thrilled. The girl marveled. She said she hadn't told her grandfather yet and would show him when she got back. Arad and the Count looked at each other in surprise. The Count laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. The latter thought he was doing it again. The hero turned to Arya and asked if she could make him fly. The girl replied that of course. She raised her hand and the bird flew out of her hand, flew a little way, and then hit the ground, leaving a trail. She stood embarrassed and smiled. The Count said that it didn't seem to have much firepower, but that was okay. Arya was upset. The hero said he thought it was fine. The Count interjected. The boy said that when not just a fireball, but an aiming bird flies over someone, it causes a shock. The head of the family agreed. The girl blushed. Arad went in the direction of the shock. He thought that, however, just like the Count said, compared to an ordinary fireball, there was not much power in it, that it was enough to set the grass on fire, that it would help scare the enemy, But in a real battle, the most important thing is power. The hero wanted to get rid of these thoughts and didn't understand why he thought that only looks or might decided everything. He thought that if he dwelled on knowledge, he would limit himself in action, and here was a good example of that. Arya turned to him. He asked if she would teach him the same, thinking that he should not assume that power and appearance could not coexist. She agreed and said that, however, it was very difficult. Everyone gathered near the carriage. Arad thought about how if one imagined water or sand in the palm of his hand, it would be easier to control magic. He said he would try it. Suddenly a huge bird of flame appeared in his hands, illuminating everything around him. Everyone was shocked to see it. The hero himself was surprised at what he had done. Arya said that it was big. The boy wondered if it was possible to do it all at once. The girl said he still needed to practice. He agreed and said it was hard. The count laughed and said that it was wonderful and to keep Arad going. At that time the hero did not yet know what would happen where they were going, and he had no idea that Klax's life was in danger at the estate. They set out again. Arya admired the ice figures and said they were very funny. The count said they were very skillful. In front of them stood the figures created by Arad. He was trying his best to make something with magic. He thought about the fact that shaping ice was much more difficult than flames, but it was dangerous in the carriage. The girl said that if suddenly he couldn't gather himself in any way, he could just try to visualize a simpler shape. She said that the one who taught her told her to visualize a bird made of paper. The hero replied that he realized, thinking of that in short, it is like origami. He thought about what he could do himself and suddenly shouted. Arya asked if something was wrong. The boy said that he seemed to have an idea, thinking about the fact that it didn't matter that it was cheat. He wondered if it wasn't a better use of invisibility. He thought about the fact that if one knew how to use Arya's fire bird, one could do both physical and mental damage. But right now it would still be difficult to do it in the open. Arad thought, why not just create a normal fireball first and then use invisibility to turn it into a bird, and that this was a solution to the problem. He thought about the fact that when he first acquired invisibility, he had already thought of using it to disguise the new magic as a fireball. The hero thought that although it was a bit unfair, it was a cool use of invisibility that he was using two magics at the same time. He thought that he might need to visualize having a fireball in one hand and invisibility in the other. Arya shouted loudly to Arad. The boy dropped down and turned to her. He got up and grabbed his head, which hurt a lot. He asked what was wrong with him. The girl said that it was she who should ask him, and that he suddenly fell down. Arad was very surprised at this. The count said that he had overdone it, and that he was showing typical signs of magic exhaustion. Arya asked if this was true. The count replied that this happens if you use too much magic. He said that she should be careful too, and that magic depletion was the worst thing that could happen. She agreed. He told Arad that he too should be more careful. The boy apologized and apologized for making him worry. He noticed that he was covered with a blanket. The hero thought that if he couldn't use two magics at the same time, it means he didn't have enough mana, and it turns out it's impossible to apply magics at the same time, and if that's the case, his perfect plan is ruined. The count said, however, there was something beautiful about it. The boy interjected. The head of the family said before the hero ran out of strength, a beautiful fire bird appeared for a second. Arad was very happy and thought it was a good thing. The count told him that until his body could keep up with the magic, he should refrain from doing reckless things. The hero agreed. Arya told him to hold still. The hero thought that if he shouldn't make the count worry, and that depletion of magic is a scary thing. They came to a stone mountain that had a giant gate. Inside was a zigzagging road to something. Arya was very surprised at how beautiful it was. She said in surprise, "What a blue lake." The hero thought it was more like colors than a simple reflection of the sky. He asked Earl Burton if this place was related to the meteor strike. The latter thought how best to say. He pointed to that islet. Arad marveled at everything around it. The count asked if they would go. The hero happily agreed. They set off ahead. Hero asked what was there, assuming there were ruins, treasures, or a dungeon. The head of the family said none of those things were there, and he thought he could see from here that there was nothing but grass on that little island. The hero was surprised and said that this is how it is. He didn't understand why there was nothing in a place associated with ancient magic, that something was wrong here, that he couldn't get away from the feeling that there was something there. Arya cried out. Count Burton asked her what was wrong. She looked at the statue and said that it seemed to have just moved. Arid asked again if the statue had moved. The girl said it had and shouted for him to look. The statue seemed to have glowing eyes and moved closer to the heroes. The statue bent forward, looming over them. Everyone was shocked. The statue looked at them and began to use magic. The heroes looked on frightened and screamed that it was magic. The statue turned old black and stood up, spreading its arms. The head of the family shouted that something was up there. A huge attack was coming at them from above, blocking the sun. The frightened Arad could not believe it. A meteorite flew at the heroes with great speed. Arad cried out fearfully. The count shouted they were running. He ran with Arya by his arm and the hero a little farther behind them. Suddenly the girl fell down and her hand slipped out of the count's hand. He shouted to her and wanted to get back, but Arad ran up and took the girl in his arms. He thought that he was not a finger and would not give up. The count shouted to the hero. The meteorite landed and there was an explosion. The water went out of its banks, and shards of rock flew in different directions. After that, things began to calm down and sand settled on the ground. Arad developed a lump and wailed. He asked Arya how she was. The girl looked frightened and remained silent. The hero thought that she seemed to be unharmed. The count approached them and asked the boy how he was. He replied that he was fine and asked what about the count. He said it was nothing serious. All the statues looked at them. Arad said that the statues used magic, and they all look at them. The count thought about it and said that it was no doubt a meteor strike. He said he had never heard of such a thing happening, and they were probably aiming at the bridge. The head of the family said that the bridge seems to be intact, but the gazebo his family built when they were given this land was blown away by the wind current. He said that it was nothing, but there was something about that bridge. He wondered if it was even worth fixing. Arad thought about what it means that this bridge and the moving statues make up a place associated with magic. The count said maybe that's why. The boy interjected. The count said that why this bridge took a zigzag shape had been a mystery for a long time. The hero thought that in his opinion, it was definitely a strange construction. He didn't understand why make it so inconvenient. Burton said that there were many hypotheses, such as the fact that it was built that way to stop the dead monsters that only moved straight. The boy screamed, thinking that these were no longer monsters, but bedtime stories of some kind. The count said that although this place was associated with ancient magic, he never understood why there was absolutely nothing here. He suggested that maybe it was a trap. The boy thought that for sure, crossing a bridge under a hail of meteor strikes is a deadly risk, and a bridge that is difficult to cross is itself an effective safety measure. The count told him that that was all for today, and given what had just happened, they should explore the area more. Arad agreed and said that they also did not know if the island was safe, so suggested that they return to the estates soon. He thought about the fact that you can't just pick up and go with your children to a place where you don't know what will happen, and the most important thing for them right now is to get out of here. The count put his hand on his head. He asked Arad if he would help Arya. The boy interjected. The count asked if he thought it was his duty as a man to protect the girl, even if he had to risk his life. The hero agreed and replied that he thought so. Burton said that the man did a good job. He said that if something happened to his friend's granddaughter, there was no way he could justify himself. Arad agreed. He didn't understand why he had to talk about it now, and thought he'd rather the fellow had figured out how to get out of here. The count took the children in his arms and said he was counting on the hero. The one was surprised and asked again. He asked what that meant. The head of the family tossed the children high up. Arad and Arya flew upward. The hero didn't realize what was happening. The count's men were looking at them. They flew over the statues. Arad thought that this way they would actually cross the lake faster, and neither would get hit by the meteor strike. He saw the count rushing off the bridge. He leaned on the railing of the bridge and jumped high. The boy looked at him in surprise. While he was watching, suddenly Arya looked around and shouted loudly. She was very frightened of what was happening. The hero told her to just hold on, and the girl kept screaming. She asked what they should do. The boy looked at the guards running through the water. Remembering the Count's words that a hero's duty as a man is to protect the girl even if he has to risk his life, he realized what he was talking about. He stared fearfully ahead. Arid raised his hand and created an ice springboard for them to land on. The way they would land, he thought, was on him. He, with Arya in his arms, rolled down the ice on his feet. The Count ran in their direction. Everything had quieted down. The Count asked if they landed on it. The hero said cheerfully that it had turned out well. Arya replied in surprise that here he gives. The guards were discussing that Arya would have better luck, and compared to the fire bird, the ice slope was too easy. They said that if it wasn't for the Count, they would have to cross the dangerous bridge again. The boy, looking at the Count, thought that this is strength, and it turns out that he is not so easy either. He thanked him, thinking that the Count could also use some magic. The head of the family said that Arid had saved Arya, and he was very grateful to him. The girl was embarrassed. He said that it was true that the sudden movements made his back seize up. The hero thought it was just like a light jog. The Count said that the boy surprised him too, and it seemed that he had regained his magic. He said that actually, he had planned to let these guys help, but he didn't expect Arad to pull something like this off. The boy thought that they were ready to repel the attack at that moment. The head of the family said that it didn't matter now, and the important thing was that everyone was unharmed. He said they would rather get out of here because they don't know what else could happen here. The boy thought about it all, and there was no way he could fully understand the situation. Arya shouted to him to keep up. He complied, thinking about the fact that he definitely saw something in the sky that second. He thought he saw ancient magic, a fragment of a meteor strike. They were met at the manor by the head maid. She turned to the Count. He asked what was. The girl said that something had happened and Clax had fallen. She said that the girl was now at death's door. Arad and Arya were afraid for her. The moon was visible in the sky. The hero ran down the corridor. There were board mages in the corner. Arad was spotted by a guy with dark hair. The hero ran to him and asked him what happened to Clax. The guy replied that she was at the healer's. The boy wanted to run in the door, but the guy stopped him. He said he'd better not look at it. The hero was very frightened. The boy said that the girl was still alive. The guy in the cap put his hand on his shoulder and said that it was better for the boy to see. The boy asked what he was saying. The guy said that he, too, sometimes acts recklessly. He said he should know what happens when you overstep your mana limits. The dark-haired mage agreed. By this time, Arya had run up to them. She too tried the door, asking if it was here. Arid shouted to her, but the girl had already gotten into the room. She fell to the floor. The two of them stared fearfully ahead. The moon illuminated the room where Clax's bed stood. The bed was pitch black. It was impossible to see the girl in it. The heroes watched fearfully. Arad turned around to the mages. The dark-haired guy said that she had used up all her mana. He said that the symptoms of mana depletion are not just a temporary lack of magical power, and in fact, there are several levels. The guy in the cap said that all magic wielders experience dizziness and loss of consciousness at least once. He said that if one continues to use magic in such a state and also goes beyond one's own mana, the mana will not regenerate naturally. Arad asked what was happening. He asked what the end result was. Everyone remained silent. Arya was puzzled. She too asked what was happening. She was answered that the magician was dying. A girl mage came out of the room. Everyone looked at her. Arya didn't understand how. She and Arad looked to Clax again. The girl closed the room. Arya shouted at the hero, asking if they couldn't do anything. He thought. The dark-haired mage turned to her. He said that unlike physical strength, magical strength could only be replenished naturally. He said that it had already happened, and there was nothing they could do about it. Arya wondered what would have happened if she had watched her better back then. The girl said that Arya was like that herself, that she was always striving ahead and acting recklessly, and that it was so important to be careful. Arad thought it was all because of him. The head maid said that the last time they saw Arad, Clax kept whispering his name to herself afterward, that she wanted to fulfill his expectations. She said she had heard the girl keep practicing magic that way. The hero realized with horror that it was he who had brought her to such a state. Arid covered his mouth with his hand. He said that Clax was dying now because she had lost a lot of mana and couldn't recover it. He asked if it was true that if her magic returned to a state of recovery, then she would be saved. The guy in the cap replied that it was so, but since there was no hope for her recovery, it all depended on her life force. He said that she was actually in a very serious condition. Arid shouted to Arya. He shouted that mana Hilaire is an ancient magic that restores mana. The surrounding people didn't understand anything. A girl asked what it was. He shouted that he understood everything. He asked her to take him to a place with a mana Hilaire. They traveled on their way in a carriage. He thought about wanting to save Clax. On the journey they slept under a blanket. Opening his eyes, Arid saw the dawn. The heroes arrived at a large and beautiful house surrounded by water. They were greeted by a girl. She was surprised that Arya had already returned. She looked at Hero and asked what he was doing here. The girl shouted to Freya and asked if Grandpa was home. The latter replied that the gentleman should be in the study and asked what was the matter. She was surprised that the girl was not with Craig. Arya beckoned Arad to go. Freya was left puzzled. The maids greeted Arya, but she ran ahead saying that she was in a hurry. She burst into her grandfather's study, opening the doors with all her might. He looked up at her. The girl shouted to her grandfather. He asked what was wrong and if something had happened. She shouted for him to bring them to a place related to mana Hilaire magic and to do it right now. Her grandfather asked why she wanted it and asked her to tell him first. Arya shouted that all explanations would come later. She yelled that it was important and that it needed to be done as soon as possible. Grandfather replied that even so, it was all so sudden. Arid thought about the fact that just like that the other one would not agree. He thought that Earl Burton had said that the place related to magic was given to him by the royal family, which meant that it was impossible to go there if one wanted to out of the blue. Grandfather asked Arya to calm down. The hero suggested to the girl that he should explain everything. She shouted for him not to worry and confide in her that she knows her grandfather better. She said that she was no longer a child, and although she swore to her father that she would not use this spell, she would do it for Clax. Arad did not understand what spell she was referring to. He wondered if Arya also knew how to use something other than a fireball, and if there was a way out of this situation, it might be something about psychological manipulation. The girl walked up to her grandfather and exhaled. She shouted loudly that he didn't understand anything and she would never speak to him again. The hero was perplexed. Grandpa repeated her words and began to fall. Arad was embarrassed. Grandpa covered his face with his hand and then fell to his knees. The hero thought that she had hit the most painful thing and that this was the result. Grandpa turned to Arya in a trembling voice. She said like this. Arad didn't understand what was happening. Grandpa leaned on the table and sat down, clutching his heart. The hero stared in surprise. He rang the bell, calling for someone. A butler came into the study and asked if he had been called. Grandfather shouted for a carriage to be brought to him, as soon and as fast as possible, so he would drop everything. The butler agreed and said it would be done. Arya showed him her tongue. The grandfather gathered his thoughts and told the girl that the carriage would be ready immediately. He continued to tremble. Arya turned to him. He asked what was the matter. She said that of course her grandfather was the best in the world. He smiled, and it was as if he was glowing. The girl thanked him. Arid watched them. He was shocked. They got into the map and set off. Freya said that it was true that Mana Hilaire would save that girl, and it must be the only solution. Arid asked if she knew about Mana Hilaire magic. The girl answered in the affirmative and said that she was working for the Count after all, and was finding out about titles and such. The hero replied that he understood. Arya replied that Freya was the best of grandfather's mages. The boy was surprised. He said that Freya was also at Earl Burton's gala. Fel was surprised that he remembered and said that however all the attention was on him then. He apologized. She asked if it had not been hard afterward, for Arya began to confront him. The girl cried out to Freya. They continued on their way through the field. Freya asked if they were sure they didn't want to stop somewhere to rest. She asked if the two of them had been in town since yesterday. Arya said that they were fine and that they needed to get to the place with the Mana Hilaire as soon as possible. Freya replied that she understood, and then they would take the shortest route there. She asked how they were going to proceed. The girl said that of course the Mana Hilaire's magic should cure exhaustion, but asked if it was possible to use it. She said that she herself had studied a lot about ancient magic, but she did not even know the way to master it. Arad replied that it remained to go and try it, thinking that he could not tell her. He said that in any case, Clax could only be saved now by a mana chiller. Everyone agreed. Arya turned to the boy and asked what if the place with the Mana Hilaire was like the place associated with the meteor strike. Freya did not understand what she meant by similar to a meteor strike. The girl asked if it would be a good idea to take Clax with her and use magic from the statue. The hero replied that he had thought of that too. He said that she had seen the condition Clax was in, and that she wouldn't have been able to go with them. Freya said that it was probably right that they didn't take her with them. She said that it depended on how severe the symptoms of exhaustion were, that it was unlikely, but that if somehow moved wrong, the mage's body would disintegrate. The heroes interjected. Freya said it would disintegrate just like a wilted flower. Arya sadly replied that that's how. They remained silent. Freya asked Arad how he even came up with the idea of using a Mana Hilaire. He told about a trip to a place related to meteor magic. He said it was only his guess, but he thought those suddenly moving statues were guarding something. Freya replied that it was an interesting guess, and statues that had been in place for years or even decades must be there for a reason, that it made no sense to put something like that where there was nothing. Arad thought about them being golems that used ancient magic as a reaction. Arya said that was why she thought that there would be statues like that in place with a mana chiller. The girl replied that it had become clear to her. She said that she heard them say that they were heading there because she was sure that there would be salvation for that girl. The children looked over with a smile. The sun was already setting. The heroes were approaching a huge waterfall that had a structure with statues above it. The birds gathered in one place. The heroes entered the gate. Arya shouted to Arad to watch. He replied that it was just as they thought. Freya asked if the golems moved and released ancient magic. Arad said they did. He said they looked a little different, but there was no doubt they were the same. The girl agreed. She said she would go ahead and check if it was safe here. She was surprised that Arya was out of sight. She called out to the girl. She had already gone ahead and was calling for the others to hurry up. Freya said that sometimes she didn't notice what was going on around her. She told the hero that it was good that he treated those around him like his family. He agreed. The girl remained silent and he felt uncomfortable. The heroes walked on, and suddenly one of the statues moved. Freya shouted he did move. The statue began to recite an incantation. The girl stepped forward and magic flew at her. It hit Freya directly and something started to happen to her. The girl seemed to glow. She said that it was a mana chiller. Arad asked what was wrong with the mana and if it had recovered. Freya replied that it was at its best. She said surprised that there was even more of it than usual, as expected from ancient magic. Arya asked if it could help Clax. Freya answered positively, adding that more than. She said she still couldn't believe that there was a means of restoring mana, even though she had just experienced it for herself. Arya said that they should find a way to take it with them then. Everyone agreed. Freya said that she wondered why those golems were suddenly stirring. The girl replied that it was better to think about the mana chiller now. Freya said that these things must be connected, though there was no proof. Arya was surprised. The hero thought about the fact that there was nothing but moving golems in both places, but there must be something triggering them. He wondered what it was. At this time Freya and Arya decided to take a closer look. Arad thought that the thing they were so protective of must be related to ancient magic, and maybe it was this thing itself. He decided that if it was, there must be a way to get it. He thought about the fact that if it were a game, there would have to be some kind of mission or challenge. Looking at the statues, Freya shouted that they were coming. The statues emitted magic that flew at the non-heroes. The girls marveled. Freya said that it was as if there was a sale of ancient magic here, and one should have brought Clack along. Arad remembered Freya's words about there being even more mana than usual. He shouted to the girls to dodge. He realized that Freya was about to be hit. Arad ran determinedly and grabbed the girl, knocking her down. One of the birds sitting around began to glow after being hit by the statue's magic. Freya asked the hero what was wrong. Arya shouted to him in surprise. He was lying on the ground, entangled in his legs. Everyone was surprised to see the bird that had been hit by the attack begin to increase in size and take on a spherical shape. The next instant, the bird was torn apart. Everyone was startled. The golems looked at the heroes. All that was left of the bird was a trace of blood and a feather. Arya and Freya were frightened. Arad looked at the statues. He shouted that it was bad and that they were shooting again. All the statues started reciting the spell again, and balls of magic flew forward. The hero didn't know what to do. He thought about the fact that he couldn't collect the fragments under these conditions, and if the golems nailed them here, they wouldn't be able to escape. The attack was right in front of Arya, causing her to be very scared. Arad yelled for her to keep going and that it was okay if she got hit once. The girl replied that she understood. The three of them ran, trying to dodge the attacks. The statues continued to attack. Finally, the heroes managed to run to a safe bridge. Freya thanked Arad. She said he was the reason they were alive. The boy said that he remembered reading long ago that even medicine can become poison if overdone. The girl replied that he was, as she watched, a bookworm, and of course his head would work. The hero thought about how both books and manga are the same, that in manga over-recovery is the same as damage. Arya looked at the statues. She said thoughtfully that it was still unclear whether clacks could only become worse from a mana hitter. The hero replied that he didn't think that would happen. Freya agreed. She said that a mana hitter can't give more mana than the one who will use it, that those golems are a different story. Arya said that, however, it seems more complicated than she thought. Arad said he thought, there still needs to be some sort of test. The girl asked if this place tests them with magic. Freya told her that while they had not seen each other, Arya had become so mature. The Ta asked if that was true. The girl replied that it would be good if the Lord saw it too. The hero asked if Count Louis was the one they were talking about. Freya said that he would not be able to find a place for himself. Arya looked at the golems. She asked what kind of trial it might be. Arad said he didn't even know what was required of them. Freya said that she would like to explore these golems, but going through there is not an option now. The hero hesitated for a moment. He thought that this was a curse and something had to be done about it. At first he thought that he would just quietly collect the fragments, but after all, this is ancient magic, and it is not like a game to pass. He thought that it's not even clear how to go through directly, and with roundabout ways, it's a high level of difficulty at all. Arya looked up and asked who it was. The others looked back. Freya didn't understand what the girl was talking about and asked what was wrong. The one asked if they had heard. Arad didn't understand either and asked what they hadn't heard. Arya said that again, the sound. The voice asked Arya if she needed power. The girl asked again. The voice repeated its question. The others didn't realize what was happening. The girl walked forward. The hero looked at her in surprise. Arya's eyes were as if clouded. She walked in the direction where the statues were. Arad shouted to her. He wanted to run and stop her, but Freya prevented him. She took his hand and yelled for him to stand. She said that things had changed there. The statues had changed their appearance. Their faces were missing. The whole place lit up with a bright light. Freya and Arad tried to close their eyes. Arya started to fall down somewhere. Freya saw that the girl was missing. They were shocked. Arya, as if in a void, was falling down. She opened her eyes and could not realize where she was. She looked for Freya and Arad, but no one responded. She thought it was too dark around and tried to use the fireball. The girl realized that she was not succeeding. The voice asked again if she needed power. Arya screamed, asking who it was. The voice repeated its question. She thought for a moment and shouted that she needed. The voice told her to choose. Girls appeared in front of her. They were 3 Aryas in different outfits. She asked if she was all of them. The boy said that if she wanted power, she should choose, and he would give her the power she wanted. Arya asked if there was one power she could choose. One of the girls approached her. She said hello and asked if Arya recognized her. The girl asked who she was. The girl replied that she was her fireball power. Arya asked back in surprise. The girl replied that she was. She said to watch. She used the fireball and a beautiful fire bird flew up. The girl exhaled and said that she had done well and she was the result of Arya's efforts. She said that her power to try harder was the proof. Another girl approached them. She asked Arya if it was true that she was learning from Freya. The latter was surprised. The girl said she was a fire bird, launching a huge bird of flame into the sky. She said that if you change a weak fireball, you get the strongest fire magic. She said that she wished for Arya. She asked if Arya had someone she looked up to and someone she followed. She said to give her hand, that she would be the power that would fulfill her wishes. Arya approached the third girl. She asked how she was and what her name was. The one was surprised. The girl said that she was an ancient magic, Mana Hilaire. Arya was pleased and took her hands. She said with a smile and tears that with this, she could save Clax. The voice told Arya that they were of the same blood, that it knew what her heart desired. Freya and Arad lost sight of the girl. Suddenly she cried out, addressing them. They were surprised and shouted that she had just disappeared. The one replied that she had taken possession of her. No one realized what she meant. The girl began to recite a spell, and the magic of the Mana Chiller appeared in her hands. The hero asked if she really could. Arya answered positively that she could. Freya said that they were so surprised when she disappeared, but how great it was. The girl said that was not all. She used a fireball and created a fire bird in her hand. Everyone was surprised. She told them to watch and created a bird of huge size. Freya and Arad looked at it with their mouths open. They didn't understand how she was able to increase the level of her magic. Arya replied that she had passed the test. Freya was puzzled. The girl said that she was overwhelmed by feelings and took possession of everything. Freya said that it was ancient magic, also a level increase. She asked what the test was. Arya shouted that all that was not about it now, and we must save Clax sooner. The girl said that that one was right, and that they would talk later. The girl turned to Arad. He was looking thoughtfully at the bridge to the statues. He thought that Arya had gotten magic by walking across, but there must be some other way here. And what if the second golem started moving as well? He yelled that he wanted to check something and for the girls to stay here. Those yelled at him trying to stop him. He ran towards the statues and wondered why he hadn't noticed it before. He thought it was clear now what these golems wanted to eliminate. He thought that they were interfering in both places related to magic and realized that it was only one thing. He realized that he was the one who was triggering them. Suddenly the golem began to move. Arad thought that the Mana Chiller was the ancient magic that he needed for both Arya and Clax, that he would still get it, that if its effect exceeded the norm, he just needed to use it again. The magical attacks of the statues flew at him. He asked how they were like that and began to recite the spell. A huge flaming bird appeared from his hands, flying upwards. Arya watched mesmerized. The bird spread its wings, illuminating everything with its light. Arad was glad it had worked out. The bird rose majestically above the statues. The hero thought that, sort of, if he relaxed, his body would dissolve. Arya was worried about the boy. Freya said that it was clear now that it was all such nonsense. The girl asked what it was about. Freya asked if it was true that he possessed a fireball. Arya answered in the affirmative. Freya asked if she now realized how much mana it takes to turn a fireball into a firebird. The girl answered in the affirmative. Suddenly, she remembered how the hero had fainted. She said that normally he wouldn't have had enough mana, and it wouldn't have worked out. But together with the Mana Chiller, he succeeded. Freya said that it was like this. She said that one fireball to control becomes very difficult. Arya agreed. Arad continued to use magic, with many fragments of magic appearing around him. He heard that a fragment of ancient Mana Hilaire magic had reached its peak. That mastery had passed. The statues seemed to have calmed down. They stood motionless in their places. Arya shouted to Arad. She called out, asking if he was all right and if he had any pain anywhere. The boy replied with a smile that he was fine. She looked at him with admiration. Freya, watching this, giggled. Arya yelled at the hero that he wasn't normal at all, that he was scaring them here. She said that now he too had begun to act so recklessly. A tear came out of her eyes. Arad asked for forgiveness. The girl asked if he really repented. Freya thought about how reckless it really was, that no matter how confident a person was, one wrong move could make him a dead man. She thought that normally one would be afraid to do such a thing. The girl assumed it was childish naivety, but then realized that he wasn't so small that he didn't understand the danger. The hero asked for forgiveness. Bowing, he said that he had made them worry. Arya said it was good if he understood. Freya asked if he had only done it out of curiosity. Arad interjected. Arya said to hurry back and help Clax. They went down the stairs. Turning back, the hero wondered if it was true that golems reacted this way to a reincarnated. The horses ran fast, pulling the carriage. It was already getting dark. Arya looked out the window. She asked how long approximately it would take them to reach Sir Burton's estate. Freya said she thought they would be there by this night. The girl asked if they couldn't be quicker. Freya replied that they could, but it would be dangerous to go faster. She said that speed rockets are not that strong. Arya said sadly that something could happen to Clax in that time. Arad said that he, too, was asking that they finally get hold of Amana Chiller, and it would be a shame not to make it in time. Arad said that although it was a little dangerous, they could get back sooner. Freya asked if this was another necessary reckless thing. They traveled along the night road. The girl spoke to the coachman. The girl shouted to the children to hold on to whatever they could, which would be shaky. Arya agreed to do so. She grasped the hero's arm with all her might. He allowed her to hold on to it. The horses sped up and the carriage began to shake violently. The hero looked out the window and noticed something. Freya asked what it was. He replied that the road was glowing. Everyone looked out the window. Arya asked again what was glowing. Arad asked if they could see it. Freya asked where it was. She said it was dark in here. The boy realized that it was the fragments that were glowing, and he was the one who could see them. Suddenly he remembered the conversation with Earl Burton, and a realization came to him. The carriage bumped into something and began to overturn. The heroes began to fall. Smoke rose. The carriage finally overturned. Its wheel broke badly. Freya was the first to get out. The coachman turned to her. The girl said the children were fine. Arya asked what had happened. The coachman asked if they were unharmed. The girl said that more or less they were. The coachman said the horses were also unharmed. Arad thought about being very frightened. He ran somewhere in the dark. Arya was puzzled. He ran over to the fragments of magic and held out his hand. He realized that it looked flat but felt hollow, that the surfaces looked and felt quite different. He wondered how his brain wouldn't break. Freya asked if it was hidden magic, adding how sloppy it was. The hero replied that it was. The girl marveled that it was also in such a place. The boy asked if it happens often. She replied that lately, apparently yes. Pointing to the carriage, she said they had worse things to do. Arad asked if they could now drive. Freya said that the wheel was completely broken. Arya wondered what to do. She blamed herself for what had happened and said that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't rushed everyone. The coachman calmed her down and told her that it was not her fault. Freya screamed that she should have learned to ride. The boy said it was all right. The girl was surprised. He boldly said to trust him. She asked what he was going to do. The hero turned to Arya. She tearfully began to talk about the carriage, but he calmed her down and told her it was all right. He began to recite the spell. The wheel was ready. Arad started that somehow it became like a disc. He decided to take out all the broken parts of the wheels and repair them with ice magic, but ice itself is fragile, so rags from the map were used as a base. He said the broken windows were dangerous and should be removed as well. Everyone marveled at how beautiful it was. Freya asked if the carriage would go now. The coachman replied that so they could drive out at once. He said that the axle was still intact, and that should be enough for a while. Arya told Arad with a smile that everything was as expected. The coachman said that we should hurry. The boy agreed. Freya said in surprise that he could do ice magic too. Thoth interjected. The carriage sped forward. The new wheel spun successfully. Arad guided it, thinking that fortunately the road was flat here, and he would be able to make it all the way to the Count's estate. Arya asked him how he was, and if there was anything she could do to help. The hero thanked her and told her to rest. The girl wanted to disagree and said about his mana. The hero said she would need a lot of mana to apply the mana chiller for Klax. Freya told the girl that it would be better to do as he says. She said there was a bigger task, and for now her main task was to fully recover. Arya agreed. Arid thought that if she got so anxious, she would get tired on the contrary. They were already approaching the manor. The children ran out of the map in a flash. They quickly ran to the house. In the hallway they met Earl Burton. Arya turned to him. He told them to come through quickly. The girl happily agreed. She ran forward. The Count said that they seemed to have succeeded. Arad confirmed his words. The head of the family hesitated. The hero was surprised that he realized it just by the mere sight of Arya. He thought about the fact that the Count had even recognized that they had returned with Mana Hilaire, a magic that had long been lost. He thought about how he had sensed how perceptive that person was before. The Count told Arad to tread. The latter immediately agreed. Under the light of the moon, he quickly ran down the corridors. Suddenly, he saw mages entering Klax's room. A dark-haired boy turned to him. The boy asked how Klax was feeling. The man replied that they were surprised. He asked if ancient magic was there. They watched as Arya restored Klax's mana. The girl stood over the bed and used magic. Arad looked at her with a smile. He replied that it was she herself, Arya's new magic. Klax's hands began to recover. The already tired Arya was very happy. Suddenly, she stumbled and began to fall backwards. Arad managed to walk over to her and help her steady herself. He asked if the girl was all right. She replied that of course she was, and continued restoring magic. She recited the spell, and the boy watched silently. He watched Klax and realized it was working. He noticed that Arya was already beginning to weaken, and then looked back. He looked at the mages and thought that he probably wouldn't be able to see from there. He discreetly used a mana chiller on Arya. The girl yelled that it wasn't over yet and kept working. The hero told her just a little more. She agreed. He thought about how ineffective it was. He thought that mana for magic and mana for repairing are not the same thing. He realized this while he was fixing the carriage. The boy stepped back into the corner. Arya turned to him. It seemed to Arad that by using 1 unit of mana to recover about 0.8, he was able to heal himself, but when mana becomes less, it can't be used like a perpetual motion machine. He wondered if it was too much, which he thought wouldn't work. He thought that it was the same with another person's recovery, which meant that recovery from him to Arya, and from Arya to Klax loses 80% mana. He decided that therefore it was inefficient, but even so it would go, and they should do it. The boy thought it wasn't about efficiency and theories, it was about Arya wanting to help Klax. Klax started to look better and better, and then she opened her eyes. The children screamed at her. The girl got up and sat down, looking at them in surprise. Arya was crying. She jumped into her friend's arms. Klax turned to Arya in embarrassment. The latter tearfully said how great it was. Arad asked Klax how her body was. Ta turned to him. She interjected, not understanding what he meant. She asked if she had been guilty of something. Arya said that the one had used too much mana and fell. The hero said that mana depletion was something like a disease, but she could take it easy now. Klax was surprised. Arya told her not to worry and that she had already restored her mana a good bit. Klax was shocked. Arya said that she had applied an amazing Mana Hilaire magic. Klax apologized for causing so much trouble. Arad turned to her. She replied fearfully. He said he thought Arya would be more pleased if she thanked. The girl hesitated. She thanked Arya with a smile. The latter said she had done what she had to do as her senior in magic. Freya ran into the room and hugged Arya. A girl mage walked up to them. Klax looked at everyone and smiled. She thanked Arad. The girl thought about how amazing it was that she could really feel Arya's warm mana inside. She was sure this mana that she was feeling. There were birds sitting on the eaves. Clax stood at the window and put on her dress. She pulled up the collar and immediately sneezed loudly. Arya appeared in the room and shouted that it was natural. The girl asked her if something was wrong. The one replied that it wouldn't work that way, that Clax was still sick and she needed a good rest. The girl began to talk about her work. Arya ran up to her and said with a smile that there was no such thing. Someone turned to her. The girls turned around. Arad was peering out of the doorway. He said she was here. Arya shouted to the boy that Clax was already going to work here. He replied that wow. Clax looked away embarrassed. The hero told her that she still had to be more careful. The girl replied that, after all, it had been a long time since she had fallen. Arya said that was all well and good, however recovery was her first task. Arad thought that she is like an older sister. He asked if it was like that. The girl and the headmaid said to rest. Arya put her in bed and told her to rest properly. The hero thought about how it is hard to rest when work is at hand, that the laptop and the remaining tasks are pressing hard. He said he thought of something. The girls looked at him in surprise. There were beautiful white clouds outside the window. They set off on their journey and came to a village. Arad held out his hand to Clax. She took it and stepped out of the carriage. When she looked back, she was surprised. She wanted to ask where they were, but Arya said it was Arad's house. The boy said it was an ordinary apartment building. Clax was surprised that they had arrived at Arad's house and looked around. The hero thought about being at the estate and being in maid mode all the time, and he got her out of there to air out. But he didn't think that Earl Burton and Arya's grandfather would let them go so easily. He stood on the threshold of his house. The boy opened the door and said he was home. He was surprised that no one was there, thinking about the fact that he wanted them to meet. He decided he would stop by later. Arad went to the girls and apologized. Clax turned to him. She asked what she could do to help here. Arya shouted that she didn't need to work here. The girl disagreed. The hero left. He asked if they would go for a walk with him. They went for a walk. He took the grass in his hand and said to look. Arya asked what it was. He replied that they were medicinal herbs, and it was the season for such. The boy said that his job was to collect and sell them. The girls were surprised. He said he would collect and asked the girls to keep up. He said that if they found the same ones, the way to take them, and it would come out to about 10 coppers for 3. They followed the path, picking herbs. Clax was especially diligent. Arya asked Arad what it was for. The latter replied that they were taking a walk. He said that Clax was too serious, and rather than do nothing, it would be better for her to do such an easy job. Arya replied that she understood. She asked if there was nothing wrong with that. The hero replied that there was nothing. They reached a field of flowers. Clax had a beautiful flower behind her ear. She and Arya sat in the flowers and wove wreaths. Arad thought, looking at them, that the two of them were just like at a picnic. He thought that it was good that he had brought them here, that it wasn't exactly seclusion, but it was always nice to be in the woods. Later, they came upon a bush with berries. They picked them to eat. Arya was frightened by this. Suddenly, a sound was heard. The hero covered the girls with his hand. They asked what was the matter. He said it was a hog. The one appeared from behind a bush. Arad told the girls to be careful. He thought they seemed to have gone around the wild roads. Clax asked fearfully what was going to happen. Arya answered her that everything was fine. She started to recite a spell, but the hero yelled for her to move back. The hog was already running at them. The girls screamed. The hero managed to grab the girls and push the hog away from the hog's attack. He shouted to the beast to run at him, thinking to divert attention away from the girls. He started to recite the fireball spell, but the hog was already close to jumping at him. The hero was surprised. He thought that he was completely out of time with the spell and jumped back. He thought that the most important thing was to protect Arya and Clax. They shouted to him. Arya looked out of the bushes and the beast noticed her. He ran toward her. Arad also ran toward the girls, trying to get ahead of the hog. Clax was at this time reading a spell. She shouted to Arya. The latter noticed that her body was glowing. She used the firebird. They defeated the monster by throwing it far back. The beautiful firebird flew in the sky. The girls looked on in surprise. Arad was shocked. The girls hugged each other. Arya thanked Klax. She said it was great. The hero said that Klax had really saved them. He said it was a great combination. The girl was embarrassed. Looking at the hog carcass, he said he didn't think he'd make any more money. He said they would give silver, not copper, for a whole hog. Klax said she was glad she could help. Arya agreed, clapping her hands. She suggested that they form a clan. The others were surprised. They asked what a clan was. Arya said that a clan is a team of known mages who have the same goals, and together they seek adventure. Klax interjected about the team. Arya thought that it turns out it's kind of like a patty in RPG games or a guild of adventurers, that it's just like a real fantasy. He thought that meant they would be a threesome. He told the girl that the one was just like a group of detectives. She asked what he was talking about. The hero replied that it was nothing, and he was just remembering something. Klax, embarrassed, asked if they would take her into the clan too. Arya replied that of course they would. Klax was embarrassed and could not formulate her thought. Arya asked her what was wrong. The girl hesitated. The others looked at her in surprise. Arad turned to her. She responded at once. He said that Arya would not just take anyone, and she wanted to team up with her specifically. Arya replied that that was exactly right. Arad thought that Klax should be spoken to more openly. The other one gave it some thought. He asked if she wanted to be with them. The girl shook her head, letting him know that she didn't. Arya became very excited. The boy said that it was settled then. Arya suggested that it should be worked out soon. She said that they needed to come up with their symbol, and the clan definitely needed it. The others agreed that a symbol was cool. They pondered how to come up with some cool one. Suddenly, Klax suggested a bird. The others were surprised. She said it was because Arya was coming out with a very pretty bird. Arad realized that they were talking about a firebird. He said that she was indeed beautiful and would do well as a bird. Arya was embarrassed and asked if that was true. The hero said the firebird symbol is great. Arya said a design is needed. The boy plucked a branch off a bush and offered to try to draw. He and Arya got 2 funny doodles. They thought about it. Arya said that Arad was not good at it at all. He thought sarcastically that she was like a master at drawing. The girl said that she felt better now that at least he wasn't so good at something. The hero replied that his design was actually based on the image of a firebird and inspired by the Japanese Yatagarasu, which is a time-honored symbol, by the way. The girl replied that he sometimes says such silly things and asked what Klax had. She was very surprised to see her drawing. She shouted how amazing it was and called Arad. He ran up and shouted that it was very beautiful. He told Klax that it was pro. Thought asked what she meant by pro. He said she was very good at drawing. The boy said they would take her drawing as their symbol. Arya agreed and offered to make the badges right away. Klax asked what the badges were. The hero suggested that they were some kind of patches. Arya responded positively and said that her grandfather would make them from this drawing. She suggested that they go back to the coachman's house soon. Arad thought of how Arya's grandfather would say that for her sake he would find the best craftsmen in the country. He suggested that the girl wait. She asked if something was wrong. He suggested that for starters he should go sell that hog. He said it was their first catch for the 3 of them. Arya happily agreed. Klax said they couldn't carry it off, and the hog was so big. The hero replied that it was no problem. Using magic, he placed the carcass in an ice cube. Arad said that way it would glide across the grass. Arya replied that that was fine. The boy said he would be freezing the ground a bit the whole time along the way, so he asked her to use a mana healer. She agreed and said he could rely on her. Arya told Klax that she should have looked at Arad's 3-legged bird, too. The boy grudgingly said that they had already discussed that. They set off, leaving behind them a wet trail of melting ice. They reached the village and found the man in the marketplace. Arad showed him the hog. The man was very surprised and gave them a coin. Klax looked at her in surprise, and they traveled onward. The heroes came to a shop. The girls looked through the window at what was inside. They looked at the lamps and vases, discussing that they were pretty and beautiful. Arya asked Arad if it was a trinket store. He replied that it was not. He said that it was the studio of a craftsman. The girl asked again. He said it was his first time here too. Arya asked why they were here. The boy said about that silver coin. The girl asked if he meant the coin from the hog. He replied that he did and offered to make badges. Arya was surprised. He said that the coin was their first trophy together and he wanted it to be a keepsake. The girls looked at him in surprise. The hero said that would be the case if they were okay with it, of course. Clax shouted happily that she agreed. She and the hero looked at Arya. The girl replied that of course she happily agreed. They went into the store. In front of the shopkeeper, Clax redrew her drawing on a sheet of paper. Arad awkwardly placed the coin on the plate. The master showed them, class. They walked out of the store admiring the new badges. The badge depicted a beautiful feather. The hero thought that although it was a cheap iron badge, still the quality was good, and for only 1 silver for all 3 of them. He thought that one should pay for craftsmanship and said that it seems they were still lucky. Arya asked if it was true. He said it was if you consider the prices of their goods. The girl sadly replied that that was how it was. The hero turned to her. She told the others to wait here and walked back into the store herself. They looked at her in surprise. The girl walked back out. The boy asked what was the matter. She replied that it was nothing, and she just said thank you again from the whole clan. The master looked out and told them to come back in for more. Everyone smiled at her. The heroes came to the fountain. Arya looked at the badge with a smile. Arad asked how they liked it, pinning hers on her clothes. Clax also pinned hers on her own and said that they united them. Arya also put her badge on and smiling replied that she liked it very much. The heroes walked on, with Arya ahead of them humming and bouncing. Clax and Arad looked at her with a smile. Suddenly, the heroes ahead noticed something. It was a drunken Robin. That one also noticed Arad and asked why he had come back. The boy wondered. Robin interjected. Clax hid fearfully behind the hero's back. Robin said that his brother had been invited to his house by the head of the family, and asked if he had come back to walk with some children. He saw the badge on Arad's clothes. He said that he had told the boy many times that he was an aristocrat and acquaintances should be normal. Arad replied that he had always been less good at drinking alcohol than his brother. The one interjected. As he left, Robin said that all his brother wanted was to have fun and to be like him. The hero wondered if Robin was ever sober for a day. Clax asked the hero who it was just now. Arya replied that it was Arad's older brother and his name was Robin. Clax was very surprised that Arad had an older brother. He was surprised that Arya remembered that. The girl said that they had only seen each other a couple days ago. The boy thought it was great that Arya remembered him, or it had happened to him before. Clax asked what to do. She said she didn't even introduce herself. The hero replied that it was okay, that the other one was probably busy too, and also tomorrow he would have time to introduce them. He thought that of course he understands that connections are important for an aristocrat, but does Robin even remember the faces of those he meets? He thought it was purely advice from him, a former office worker. He hoped his drinking habits would one day bear fruit. The trio traveled onward as they suddenly encountered on the way the crew from whom Arad had once inquired about ancient magic. The hero was very surprised. The girl asked if he was the same boy and greeted him. He said hello and thanked her for her help then. The girl replied that it was no big deal. He disagreed. The hero thought that he couldn't find out specific information about ancient magic then, but realized that ordinary mages don't know about it. Arya turned to him. He apologized and said that he had met this team in the forest earlier and they had been kind to him. The team waved to the children. The man noticed the badges and that the children had the same ones. He asked if they were a team. Arya replied that they were, and that they had assembled a clan. Arad agreed and said that they had recently assembled it, just today. The guy marveled at the clan and asked if they all happened to be mages. The girl said that to meet 3 such young mages at once was a good sign, and look, and she would have more magic. The man laughed and said that it was definitely. The girl said that it was now clear that Arad was a magician. She asked if that was why he questioned then. She asked if it was about ancient magic and if he had learned more about it. The hero blanched. Arya said that if anything, she had gotten hold of ancient magic. The girl was very surprised. Arad was not happy that the girl had told about it. As far as he understood from Sir Burton, ancient magic, which is also a title, is best not to be talked about. He figured there was Freya who knew about it after all, and maybe it depended on different families. He decided that just in case, before Arya started telling even more, he would enter the dialogue. The girl used a mana chiller on the girl. The latter was very surprised. Arad was shocked that she was already using ancient magic. Arya proudly said that it was ancient magic. The girl was surprised and asked if it was the magic that restores mana. People started to stop and stare at them. The hero realized that it had attracted attention. He shouted to the team, asking if they had fought monsters today. The man replied that they had. The girl said that just now they were back. The boy said that they would now go to wash the crystals. He noticed that it was true that the crystals were not thick today. The man told him that all sorts of days happen. The girl told Arad that they were hunting in the place where they had met him. The team said their goodbyes. Arad and Klax looked at Arya in surprise. The girl turned to them. She suggested that they go hunting monsters. Klax was frightened. The hero asked if they would go alone. Arya replied that they were, and that this was their first mission as a clan. Arad thought about whether to go for the monster children. He realized that he would have to protect Arya and Klax. The hero thought that the same Japanese from his past life still lived inside him, although he had already lived in this world for about 6 years, and it was still about a fifth of the past world. So sometimes he reminded himself that he was not a full-fledged resident here. He thought that people were not treated like children in this world because of his age, and he started working since he was a child, which was not surprising. Arad thought that no matter how small a person was, if he was independent, he would be treated like an adult. He thought that is why, for him, who grew up in a society with a clear age division, it is difficult for him to perceive this after rebirth. The boy thought that when he was looked at as an adult, he didn't mind. However, in these two insiders he still saw children. He pulled off his clothes and looked at his badge. Arya asked what is. He replied that it was nothing. The hero thought about how strange it was that they were the ones who got the hog. He suggested that they do one run-through before the real performance, adding that it was important to prepare. The team took the field. Arad asked if they were ready. The girls replied that they were always ready. He shouted that then they would start. He threw a small crystal forward. The crystal began to transform. The team looked at it. The crystal began to move forward quickly. Arad started to read a spell and shouted to Klax. She used quick magic and the hero used ice rock. A huge ice rock appeared in front of them. The crystal crashed into it. The heroes covered their faces from the ice debris. Arya began to recite a spell and sent a flame bird into the block of ice. The beautiful bird flew into the sky. Only a puddle of water was left in front of the heroes. Arya said joyfully that they had succeeded. Arad thoughtfully agreed. He said he thought they should go into the forest and find more hogs. But it was hard to predict where the beast would end up, so he constructed a layout with magic. There was a switch on the ground that was used to adjust the distance according to the prey. It was necessary to throw a rock to trigger the magic and launch the ice rock aside. The boy thought about the fact that if that ice block had been a hog, they would have been able to take him down immediately with that combination. Klax told Arad and Arya that they were so cool. Arya said that Klax helped them too. The hero agreed. He thought she had a fast and accurate spell, which was the key to the combination. He thought about what if there was a hog instead of ice. Arya turned to him. She said that the three of them could defeat the monsters without a doubt. The hero replied that he understood. He suggested that they do it tomorrow. The girls were surprised. He said to recover mana, thinking that it was a lucky chance. He thought that if they all made an effort together, it would be a big step towards his independence, and one should stop acting like their protector. Arya said she couldn't wait. Arad said he would come up with a plan for them tonight, and he would also like to learn more about Klax's quick magic. The girl agreed. Suddenly a girl from that team appeared. She said that she had finally found them. The hero asked in surprise what was the matter. She said that she had thought of introducing them to the people in the Magic Guild. The guys were surprised. The girl said that if they formed a clan, it would be better for them to join. Clax said that she had heard that it was very difficult to join a guild. Arya was surprised. Arid thought that he seemed to have heard of that too. He asked why. The girl replied that because he had memorized it. The boy asked again. She said that they don't often remember people they've only seen once and just asked the question. The hero was surprised that that was all just why. He said it wasn't such a big deal. The girl was surprised. She asked that, for example, memorizing a passerby whom a person has seen a couple of times is not the same thing, isn't? She said that you don't usually meet people like that. Arad reflected that he didn't think so actually. He asked the girls what they thought of the guild. Clax hesitated for a moment. Arya said they thought it was great. She asked Clax if it was. She said yes. The boy smiled. He said then they were counting on them. The girl agreed. She said she would ask some people she knew in the guild, and then she would find them. Arid thanked her. She asked if she could get in touch through him. The boy agreed and said he was Arad Senver. As they said goodbye, the girl shouted that cool their clan was. Arya agreed with a smile. The team of 3 sat on the grass. Later, neither set off on their journey. It was already getting dark. In the morning, Arad woke up in the hammock and stretched. He went down the stairs. Clax wished him a good morning. The boy answered her in the same way. He asked how she was feeling. Holding the food in her hands, she replied with a smile that she was already well. She thanked him for letting her stay in that room yesterday. The hero replied that it was fine and they don't have guests anyway. He wondered if the bed was too small. He asked if Arya was awake. The girl replied that she had just. The boy opened the curtain and wished Arya good morning. He was very surprised to see her. It was as if she was still asleep. Clax told her that he would be right over. She ran over to the bed. The girl put the plate of food on the nightstand and said she would take Arya's hairbrush. Arid thought that it seemed that she was still half asleep. Clax said she would help her get ready. She started combing the girl's hair. The hero said he would go downstairs for now. He said that they were waiting for Arya too. Clax replied that she would do everything. The boy went down to his parents. He and his mother wished each other a good morning. The father noticed that his son was awake. He asked what was wrong with Miss Arya. The hero replied that Clax was collecting her. The father said that she was their guest and Arad was responsible. The man replied that he understood. The father asked what was wrong. The boy hesitated. He said that although the father knew who Arya was, he was behaving as he always did. He said his brother behaved differently, remembering his surprise. Robin said what a splendid outfit Arya had, and that she could have bought the whole run-down house too. His father told the boy to memorize it well, too. He said that an aristocrat should know how to behave according to the situation, that one should live up to one's name. He said that no matter how side branch of their family, one should not be modest all the time. Arad realized that they were guests in the main house, but here they are the hosts, so the attitude is different. He thought it was even more complicated than business etiquette. Robin came into the room and asked if Arya had come down yet. He asked what they would have for breakfast and if they would be embarrassed in front of a girl from the Lewis family. His mom was very surprised. The hero was embarrassed. Suddenly, he noticed that Clax and Arya had come down. Robin immediately gave Arya a seat and Clax went to the boy's mom to get a plate. Arya looked at Robin in surprise. Arad's father drank his drink nonchalantly. Clax smiled at the hero's mother. The latter was looking at it thoughtfully. After breakfast, the clan went to the field. The hero asked if it was hard to sleep on their bed. Clax replied that it was fine. Arya said she smelled like him. The boy started sniffing himself and asked if it was true. Arya said it was just like the lawn at her house. He realized it was about grass and said that's how it was. He suggested we take a walk before going hunting. The girls agreed. The boy saw a glowing ball of light. He thought about the road being trashed. Arya asked if there was anything there. He answered in the negative and offered to go on. In the forest he noticed something. A rabbit had fallen into his cage. Arya asked if it was Arad's magic. He replied that it was, and that it came out well here. The girl asked in surprise if it was what he had done yesterday. The hero answered in the affirmative. He said that he used the same delayed magic that he used in training. Arya said that means hunting with traps. He replied that it was exactly that. Suddenly, the rabbit jumped out of the cage and rushed to run. Arid became frustrated, noting that it was just like picking herbs all day. He said what was thought had worked out. Arya said that was how he was able to get out. The boy said he wanted to take him alive. Arya asked why. He replied that he was told the price would be different. He said he used to kill them with an ice spear and thought he could take them alive with an ice cage. Arya asked if that was the case, that the cage was broken. The hero said yes. He said that it was not suitable for warm weather. He said that although he had practiced controlling the ice rock then, the technique was meaningless if it was not used anywhere. Clax said that it was still great that he had thought of it at all. Arid thanked him. He thought about the fact that in both magic and aristocracy, one should respond appropriately. Arya turned to him. She asked if any magic could be made delayed. The boy replied that he thought it could, since it had worked with the fireball. The girl excitedly asked him to teach her. The hero asked if she wanted to now. Arya asked if it was okay with Clax. She replied that of course she was okay with it. They walked out into a field of flowers. Arya was reciting an incantation. The others looked at her. A hero saw fragments of magic under her feet. The heroes sat and waited. Arya turned to the sleeping Arad. He apologized and said he had dozed off on something. She said it was nothing. She suggested that it would be better to have lunch, adding that Clax had prepared a basket there. The hero rejoiced. He said he was impatient. He went toward the girl's side. Suddenly magic appeared. The boy turned to Arya and saw her satisfied face. Clax said it was all magic. The boy was glad that they had already succeeded. Arya said he would make a good teacher. Arid said he thought he was the one who had been taught well. He marveled that she was able to make ancient magic deferred as well. Arya turned to him. She thanked him for teaching her. The boy replied that he was welcome. Arya asked him if something was wrong. He replied that everything was fine. Clax was puzzled. He thought about the fact that there should have been fragments when practicing and did not understand why there were none. Suddenly he saw one fragment. To this fragment led the tracks of some beast, together with human footprints. The hero saw a glowing beast holding the fragment of magic in its teeth. Everyone thanked Clax for the food and said it was delicious. Arid turned to the girls. He said he would remember this moment for a long time. Clax said it was all thanks to Arya. The latter became embarrassed. She said that she could do that too, and then she began to recite a spell. The hero was very surprised. Clax said that it was as if the magic was walking by itself. The boy was surprised that the mana chiller follows her. Arya said that it was Clax who prompted her. The other was surprised. The girl said that it occurred to her when Clax brought the basket, and it was something like a mana snack. Arid thought that it was not easy to think of such a thing. What he thought he understood about delayed magic was that the activation and the effect of the magic happen at the same time. That the magic is activated by timing or something else, and the effect is triggered. And in short, in delayed magic, everything is timed. He could see that Arya had it all wrong. Arid thought she was triggering the magic, but delayed only its effect. He thought she was controlling the separation of magic activation and mana recovery, that the girl was right on another level. He wondered. Arya turned to him. He asked her to listen. The hero asked how much he could support her. The girl replied that as much as she wanted. He was shocked. Arya said that magic is like this all the time until she touches it. The boy asked in surprise if that was true. The girl replied that it was so, that it was hard to explain in words and had to be felt. She said that she was only able to do it with the mana hilaire, but not with the fireball and the bird. Arad realized what was the matter. He asked if it was because the mana hilaire belonged to her family, so she could control it more than other magic. Arya replied that she understood, and apparently it is so. Clax was surprised that the mana hilaire belongs to Arya's family. The hero turned to Arya. He said that he needed her to explain a little too. The girl asked what he meant. He realized from Arya's explanation that mana hilaire is not just a delayed magic, that it can be activated, but the effect will remain delayed, and the girl calls it mana snacking. He thought about the fact that until it was used, the snack wouldn't consume mana, and eventually the sedimentation would trigger. He thought that this snack could still be called a kind of mobile charger, something that doesn't run out. He thought that in addition, the snack could also be invisible if desired, and it seems that Arya doesn't need invisible magic for that. He realized that only she could pull such a thing off. Clax reached out her hand and said she couldn't touch it. Arid tried it too and said it was true. Arya showed what would happen if she touched. The hero realized that meant she could only launch it of her own free will. The girl asked if there was anything else they wanted to know. The boy replied that she had answered everything he wanted to ask, thinking that now it would fit more in his head. He thought about the Count's daughter using lost ancient magic. That's straight cheats from a manga or a Ranube of some sort. While he himself was a reborn that he sees fragments of magic, Arya looked at his face and asked if something was wrong. The hero asked if they didn't understand. The girl was puzzled. He said that she had an awesome magic, didn't she? She interjected. Clax asked in what sense. Arid said he thought they should realize that if you don't overdo it, mana is restored to its maximum every day. Clax was very frightened by the word overdue. She apologized for that. The hero shouted that it was okay, that he didn't blame her for it. The girl said upset that she had caused trouble then. Arid apologized and said he didn't mean it. He went back to what he was talking about. The boy said that, for example, if Arya didn't use magic every day and kept all her mana outside, then the next day she could use twice as much mana. He asked if that was true. The girls understood everything. He said that on the second day there would be even more mana, and on the third day even more, and it turns out one cannot use magic for 100 days. Arya said that in that case one can use 100 times more mana. The hero replied that it is. He said that although there are few such magic-free days, using only half the mana, the other half can be set aside. He asked if that was so. The girl replied that it was indeed possible. Clax said that it was possible to save half of the mana every day. Arya agreed and said that there is a lot of mana left in the save. Arid said that when Arya used all of it, she could stand up to any major mage. He pictured before him a grown Arya with a staff in her hand. The heroes entered the forest. Arid said they would not go far today. The girls agreed. Clax looked at Arya's mana snack and said it was like it was alive. Arya agreed and said it was cool after all. The hero thought, here he is, he can't do that. Behind his back, he used a mana chiller, thinking about how usually if you control more than you need to, it doesn't work out. He wondered if it was because the mana hilaire was an ancient magic. He thought about the mana chiller's blood. Arid thought about the mana hilaire recovering mana being a rare ancient magic. He was absolutely right. He thought that ancient magic was quite different from any ordinary magic, that it was only available to a select few. He thought that such magicians were those who inherited it through the bloodline, that they could use it for real. He looked up at the tree and told the girls to stand. Arya asked if anyone was there. He replied that there seemed to be and asked Clax to start. The girl agreed and used quick magic. Suddenly the root changed its shape. It was a living stump. Arid wondered about what it was called and what RPG it came out of. Clax shouted that it was a Trent. The hero remembered. He was surprised that the Trent was one, assuming there must be many. Arya shouted to him. He said they would do like they did yesterday at practice. The girl agreed. The hero used an ice rock that immediately began to appear between them and the monster. Trent struck the rock with his root, causing several shards to fall from it. Arya jumped up and used the fire bird, aiming it directly at the monster. Arid thought it was great that she launched the fire bird from the sky. Trent began to burn. Arya cheerfully said that she had succeeded. The boy shouted that he hadn't yet. Clax was frightened. Arya shouted that he was on fire, but still moving. The hero realized that the Trent was stronger than a normal monster. He shouted that he would distract it and Arya should attack again. The girl agreed. The boy noticed that the monster reacted to the movement. He thought that if so, instead of building a wall, there would be ice bait. Arid created the bait in the form of ice figures, and the Trent attacked them with its roots one by one. At this time, Arya had already read the spell, and gave the monster a very powerful blow. Only the crystal was left of the Trent. Clax asked the others if they were hurt. Arid replied that he was fine and thanked the girl. Arya said she was fine too. The girls looked at the ice figures in surprise. The hero explained that Trent reacted to something moving, So he created a lure out of an ice rock. Arya said that it was a whole art. He said that thanks to Clax he was able to make statues out of ice. The girl said that all she did was use a spell and time. Arid said it was the same as with cooking. He said that if you don't do everything on time, you can spoil the food. Clax agreed. The hero said it is the same with magic, which is also what Sir Burton said. He said that ordering magic is difficult. Arya agreed. She said that she too was able to create the Firebird precisely because of Clax. The latter was very embarrassed and thanked. Suddenly a man in a cloak appeared and shouted to Arod. The man asked what was the matter. The man said that it was good that they were unharmed. It was a mage with dark hair. He shouted for them to get out of the forest faster. The hero wondered why. The boy replied that they were attacking, that he didn't know who, but someone. The boy asked back in surprise. The boy said that they were. He said it was someone invisible.